This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with James O'Brien.
3 minutes after 10 is the time. A very good morning indeed to you. There's quite a bit around today, you know. There's no immediately obvious, as there has been in recent days, story that absolutely demands all of our attention. But PMQs coming up at 12 could be very, very interesting. It's an extraordinary moment, or not a moment, an extraordinary reflection of that old adage about a week being a long time in politics, isn't it? That Kemi Badenoch not long ago was the one whose leadership looked like not surviving, possibly even until the local elections in May, whereas now Keir Starmer's position is, or has been in recent days, considerably shakier. And of course, some people, mostly weirdos, very keen to claim that Badenoch is embarked upon some sort of renaissance. Their polling numbers for a government that is in the doldrums, the idea that His Majesty's opposition would be polling as low as it is in any other circumstances would be catastrophic. But we are not living in normal circumstances, and we haven't been for a decade, because of what happened a decade ago. And it is to that Rachel Reeves will finally turn later today with a speech that is going to point out the bleeding obvious. I don't know whether we're going to file that under better late than never, or whether we're going to roll our eyes in despair at the fact that it's taken 10 years for a senior member of any government to admit that not being in one of the major economic blocs currently dominating commerce on this planet is an act of supreme idiocy. Look forward to that speech later today. It tallies, seeing as the B word is back in the news, it tallies with a speech from a former head of the armed forces, or an intervention at least, explaining the necessity of a European army, while the Epstein files, to knit three outwardly disparate elements together into one unified theme, the Epstein files make it pretty clear that an awful lot of the movement and possibly even the money behind Brexit came from deeply unpleasant and morally corrupt oligarchs who just like to break things because rules limit the amount of money they can make, up to and including Steve Bannon explaining to the paedophile Jeffrey Epstein why Brexit would be brilliant and why he wanted to fill the European Parliament with fascists, because they could be most relied upon not to put any obstacles in the way of them making untold sums of money. Funny that, isn't it? Funny. But not, I'm afraid, funny ha-ha. And it is to Epstein that we turn first this morning. I told you something yesterday, and I haven't, I'm afraid, made much progress with the thing that I was struggling with. And it is a question of how we properly report, reflect, recognise the plight of Jeffrey Epstein and his friends, victims. Still only one man has been jailed for the industrial scale abuse of young women. And it is those young women whose voices seem to me to be almost quietest. And I want today to turn our attention to the King and the royal family and their failure to properly... They kind of did with Andrew what the Labour government has stood accused of doing with Mandelson. And they haven't they? Would you say that was fair? And the King is on the hook effectively for doing what Starmer did, and for not moving quickly enough, for not acting robustly enough, for not really doing anything meaningful until their feet had been brought so close to the fire by revelations in the files at different times. I don't think the chronology is identical, but I suspect that the sin might be very similar. And, we are still a very deferential nation. Most of us have mostly warm feelings for the King, even if we find the institution of monarchy at various degrees of anachronistic or absurd. But not doing this speaks to the thing I was trying to talk to you about yesterday. I didn't fail to find a way into the conversation, but I'm still not quite sure that we're ready for the phone-in, because the phone-in is, we don't care enough, do we? We don't care enough about these women who appeared on an advert released during the Super Bowl, the biggest television audience, I think, on the planet every year. But it's suddenly up there, and the ad spots in the Super Bowl have become almost a cultural phenomenon of their very own. And this advert was released during... it wasn't in the advertising break. It was released while the while the Super Bowl was on. So, the attempt to kind of piggyback, if you like, the biggest television audience in the world. And it certainly merits your time.
After years of being kept apart, we're standing together.
Standing together.
Because this girl deserves the truth.
Because she deserves the truth.
Because we all deserve the truth.
And you don't know, do you, quite why their struggle for the truth has been so long and so hard, except quite possibly under the heading of people don't care enough. And if you sense a certain reluctance in my voice, it's not the flipping king's fault that these women's stories have not been properly investigated or heard yet. But I think that he is part of the answer to the question of why. And people don't care enough. People just don't care enough. There's a hideous story today about an Afghan asylum seeker being convicted of raping a 12-year-old girl. And you can tell whether someone's racist or not, very simply, by tracking their reaction to that crime and comparing it to their reaction to the Epstein crimes. Should we, for example, be banning all wealthy, rich American men from visiting the United Kingdom because many of them have turned out to be rapists and paedophiles? Should we think long and hard about letting anybody into our country who is rich and white because many of them have turned out to be... you see what the phone-in would be if I was a hideous hypocrite. So those of us who feel equal levels of disgust at child sexual abuse... because we come at it from the survivor's point of view or the victim's point of view, are having another one of those days where you recognise the epic double standards of everybody else. And that feeds into the question of why, doesn't it? Donald Trump is not currently in much trouble politically, and he was in the metaphorical bed with Epstein for 10 years. Keir Starmer's not mentioned in the files at all, and he's had the worst week of his political career. Peter Mandelson stayed in touch with Epstein long after his hideousness had been established in a court, and so did Andrew Windsor. And the king did nothing. But nobody ever does. So a weird thing happens when an institution is threatened. And that weird thing is that almost everybody involved acts to protect the institution. It's not quite as morally corrupt as it initially sounds. Because if you and I were both committed to something or part of something, imagine we were part of the same organisation, and the organisation found itself knee-deep in scandal, what we would do is ask ourselves, how do we stop the scandal reaching our waists or our shoulders or even engulfing us all together? And that will rarely... This is why what Wes Streeting did yesterday was quite interesting, but we're not talking about that today. Rarely will anybody respond to scandal by looking for more. That's what the investigators and the journalists do. But rarely will anybody on the hook for a scandal respond to it. I mean, the natural reaction... it takes me back to when I got expelled from school, and the school started telling lies about my home life because they wanted the drugs issue that I got expelled for to somehow be removed from the school. So they claimed that it was behaviours that we'd picked up at home, which was absolute rollicks. I never really understood at the time why Mum and Dad were so upset about that. But an institution moves immediately into self-preservation and self-protection. And that's what the royal family has done. It's not so much what Keir Starmer did, because he didn't have to appoint him. You can, of course, pick your ambassadors. You cannot pick your family, to paraphrase another old adage. And I just looking today at some of the coverage. There's a lot here. I'm sorry, it's not quite as laser focused as my introductions are about once every 10 years. But how much trouble should the king be in for this? How big a scandal is this? This involvement in... What is it even? What are we talking about? Are we talking about a cover-up? Are we talking about self-preservation being prioritised above all else, which everybody does, by the way? And are we looking at something that is of serious significance? I think we are. Sheila Fogarty was on characteristically sparkling form yesterday. Don't go anywhere else for your royal phone-ins, by the way. And she really highlights this as a scandal of epochal significance. Crisis management teams, lawyers, advisors, all of that being brought in, not to protect the women whose voices you just heard, or Virginia Giuffre, or any of Epstein's victims, or any of the trafficked young women and girls that appear in the Epstein files. The palace has dedicated itself until this week to protecting the palace. There it is. Gosh. The palace has dedicated itself until this week. Yesterday's news headlines contained a line about William and his wife expressing concern for the victims. And that was headline news. Hello? Epstein, your uncle's Bezzy was in prison in 2008 for committing crimes that were well publicised. Andrew must be one of the most scrutinised people on the planet when it comes to what British authorities and British security services do know about an individual. You and I could probably go to Pizza Express in Woking without anybody knowing anything about it. But you can't if you're a member of the royal family. There's two phonies here. I'm not sure I can do them both at the same time, but I'm going to try. The first is, how bad is this for the king? 0345 6060 973. The fact that their senior member of that organisation continued to hobnob and fraternise with a paedophile long after his depravity became established. And we know the depth of that hobnobbing, the depth of those associations. It appears that he has been economical with the actuality with regard to that infamous photograph of Virginia Giuffre with him. There is much more filth in these files than was previously known. And although nobody can claim that anybody should have been aware of things they couldn't be aware of, how bad is this? It's not a question I ask you very often. And there's a reason why, is that it paints too big a goalmouth. And the reason I'm asking it today is because it is inextricably linked to the second question I'm about to ask you. And I don't want to ask you this question, but I don't see how I can avoid it. We don't care, do we? Society doesn't care about the victims of these kind of crimes. Elements of society pretends that it cares when they can make racist or political points about some perpetrators. But when wealthy white men abuse young women and girls, and yeah, I'm putting myself in this category. I think I care, but I clearly don't care enough, because this is the first time I've conducted a phone-in since this story broke that comes at it entirely from the perspective of the women whose voices you just heard in that short film. So, can you knit that? You can see why they're in the same vista for me. You can't. You can see why. I'm not making excuses. I'm not making excuses for the palace. I'm simply observing that they have behaved like almost every institution I can think of would behave. And they've moved to protect themselves. And they can only do that because when push comes to shove, they do not care enough about the victims. And that's why my ears pricked up yesterday. That's why it stuck in my craw yesterday when our news bulletins were led by the news that William and Kate had spoken out in support of the victims or condemned the abusers. I can't even remember what it was, because it just felt so weird to me that would be headline news today or yesterday, when the story has been around for a very long time and Epstein's depravity has been established since at least 2008. In the case of Donald Trump, much longer than that, as we'll discover later in the programme. He was speaking to police chiefs about how disgusting Epstein is long before you even knew Epstein's name. So I'm not suggesting for a minute that the palace deserves the benefit of the doubt simply because it's done exactly what everybody else does. But how are we ready to have that? Okay, here's the question. So it's happened sometimes when I'm struggling with a subject. It only pops up at the very end. Why? Why do we look away? Why don't we care more? It's not confined to crimes committed by predominantly Pakistani grooming gangs, although that's part of the same phenomenon. When those young women come forward begging to be believed, they're not. And the same is true of the victims of extremely wealthy white men from all walks of life. Why? Why, when young people come forward to report, and it must take an awful lot of courage to do that, why do we, as a society, so often look the other way? Refuse to listen? We did phone-ins years ago about the Catholic Church. Would you believe? That's how old I am. It's how long I've been doing this. And some of the calls we took at the time have stayed with me forever. And it was when you told your mum what the priest was doing, and your mum told you off. This is heavy stuff for 10 o'clock in the morning, 10 o'clock on a Wednesday morning, but that's the point, isn't it? Because that's the beginning of an answer to the question. Why don't we care more? Because I don't want to talk about it, James, and I don't want to think about it. And that's a forgivable, even perhaps a completely natural reaction to the worst kind of behaviour that other human beings commit. I told my mum what happened, and my mum told me off. My mum made me wash my mouth out with soap and water. I told my mum what happened, what the priest was doing to me. This is me remembering a call from back in the day, and my mum got angry with me. So the palace did it. The palace didn't respond in the way that we all like to pretend we always respond. Oh my God, an allegation of paedophilia. Break the glass, sound the alarm, stop all the clocks, call the police. Nobody ever does that. In schools, in churches, in palaces, in government. An allegation of paedophilia, an association with paedophilia. Stop all the clocks, call the no. Crikey, phone the crisis management people. Keep your head down, hope it goes away. And nowhere in any of those calculations and contemplations does the victim or the survivor even appear. Even appear. So, one of the hardest questions I've ever asked you, and please accept my apologies for taking so long to get there. I want you to talk to me about the king, but the central question here, I think, is why? Why don't we do more? Why don't we care more? Why does society almost always edge away from these stories instead of leaning into them, when we often congratulate ourselves on caring more about these issues than we do about almost any other? That's the question. Why do we almost always fail to do what is so obviously right when it comes to behaviour that is so obviously wrong? The palace, hope it goes away, try to bury it. Downing Street, we don't know why, it's not that big a deal. We can send him there, he was only friends with him. And of course then you hop over the Atlantic to America, where they're all up to their necks in it and nobody seems to give a monkey's. Why is that? How can it be that on the rhetorical level, this is the single most disgusting thing that human beings can do, and we are all absolutely outraged and disgusted by it, and we live in constant fear of our children falling into the clutches of a paedophile, in the way that extraordinary caller yesterday came so close to experiencing. And yet when push comes to shove, when the opportunity to do something about it presents itself, we almost always shirk our responsibilities and our duties, and I don't know why. 21 minutes after 10 is the time. We're supposed to care more about this. We're constantly told we care more about this. We constantly claim we care more about this than we do about almost any other crime ever committed. And yet when we have the chance to address the culprits and the perpetrators, we almost always look away. And I don't know why. Do you? 0345 6060 973.
James O'Brien on LBC.
4 minutes after 10 is the time. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC, and the question is one of the ugliest I'll ever ask you, with a slight side order of Buckingham Palace. How bad is this for them, given that we spent a week talking about Keir Starmer's failure to banish Peter Mandelson to the outer reaches of civilization as a consequence of his associations with Jeffrey Epstein continuing long after Epstein was convicted of his original crimes. King Charles is just as culpable, and I wonder whether he should be in just as much, if not more, trouble. But the other question that popped up during my pontifications was somewhat rhetorical, wasn't it? Why don't we care more? Why don't we care more? Why don't we do more? Eileen is in Hamilton. Eileen, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. I think this is terrible for the King, from the point of view They've known about it for so long. The question of £12 million, Charles will know what all of that is about, and if he doesn't, that's complete delusion.
This is, I mean, you're right to raise that. Sorry, carry on. I've said quite enough already.
I was just going to say also, he's been responsible for putting up his brother, almost being his keeper. That I can't think what's worse, the fact that he's responsible for putting up his brother, but not pressing him to give evidence under oath. So I think that puts the King's hands all over it. It puts the Queen in a precarious position because of her charity work. And worse, I feel that what's actually worse is that he's in a worse position than Keir Starmer, because he's known about it for all those years. And if the police and security services were all over Mandelson's properties, why haven't they treated the King's brother the same? I can't even bring myself to say that man's name.
Well, I can answer that in that he's not suspected at the moment. Well, actually, he is, isn't he? Crikey.
Yeah.
Sharing sensitive information with a paedophile. I don't know if it would count as state secrets. It wouldn't count as state secrets or government business. So there might be a nuance there, but that's the allegation with Mandelson, is that he shared sensitive information he only had access to because he was in government or very close to government, whereas Andrew is sharing allegedly reports on visits that he's undertaken. I mean, why he's sharing it with Epstein is anybody's guess, except that obviously there was some sense that Epstein would somehow benefit from it. So yes, the idea that I think you were on the line before I reached the end of my endless monologue this morning, so you don't have to answer the next question. But it's just true, isn't it, that what you've described is an act in crisis management and crossing your fingers and hoping it goes away. It's
crisis management over care for the victims.
Yes, always.
Commercial.
Always.
Paranoia, not want to be cancelled by his subjects, when in fact, if he cared so much about the victims, the way that his wife appears to with her charity work,
yes,
he wouldn't have waited all this time, and Prince William as well. They would have been out saying, prove you're innocent, give evidence under oath, get in front of the committees in America, show Virginia that you are innocent if you are, and I don't think he is.
How are we being unfair? Only in the sense that we're expecting them or him to behave in a way that nobody else has ever behaved. Because what happens in these moments, what happens, I think, in the room where it happens, is that everybody's sitting around a table asking one question and one question only, which is, how do we make this go away? Or how do we get through this? To which the answer is never going to be, make the scandal bigger. Which is what we're expecting and asking them to do.
When this first came to light, they should have ripped the plaster off and dealt with it as our monarchy. In that case, they might have saved that poor girl, Virginia. If she was listened to earlier, she might not have went down that route she did. And I think that's so upsetting.
Who knows? Yeah. And the question of why we don't care enough, is it, I mean, the obvious answer that we're both providing is pretty simply that because so much effort goes immediately into crisis management, investigation and victim care or survivor care gets pushed out of the off the agenda entirely. I don't want to say I like that, but
the firms see victims with less commercial.
But what about the rest of us? What about the rest of us?
Well,
what can we do?
All of us could be subject to it. You just need to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. And there will be people listening just now, James, who haven't reported incidents.
Of course they will.
Whether it be against their boss, someone more powerful. Sorry, I work in a school.
That's quite good, Lord.
And I'm really passionate about it. I was
going to say, you need to take that budgie to the vets. Eileen, I can see why you're very passionate about it. Well, rather, I could hear your passion before you contextualised it in the most obvious way. To clarify one thing, Thames Valley Police is assessing a complaint by an anti-monarchy group over the alleged sharing of confidential material by Andrew Windsor. The only reason I had a wry chuckle there was because one of the things I didn't mention in my introduction was the difficulty of knowing whether our opinions on stories like this are informed by our previous opinion about the royal family. So if you're a die-hard monarchist and I say to you, how big a problem is this? You're going to say not that big at all. And if you're a diehard Republican and I say, how big a problem is this? You're going to say huge. But the rest of us in the margins, or in the middle rather, don't have particularly strong feelings either way regarding monarchy or republicanism. How big a deal is this? And Eileen's first out of the blocks this morning with a pretty simple answer, huge. And it does, doesn't it? I'm not going mad. It speaks directly to that second question, that hideous, that horrible question of why we don't care more, why we don't care enough. Dominic Ellis is here with your headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC.
34 is the time. Better late than never, or pitifully poor? Royal family finally address it. I mean, it's been done incrementally anyway. I think King Charles is a good man, and I think that his office is run impeccably, actually. I think that the early years of his monarchy have gone about as well as anybody could have expected, but you don't doff your cap or tug your forelock on a morning like this. You're looking at what the machine, what the firm, as they call themselves, did with regard to the paedophile's friend in their midst. And it feels very different already, doesn't it, to the conversation that everybody's been having about what Keir Starmer did with regard to the paedophile's friend in their midst. Keir Starmer almost lost his job over it. Nobody's suggesting for a minute that the king is going to have to abdicate, and I don't fully understand why. So that's the angle. That's the way into the story today, is through Buckingham Palace. Keir Starmer almost lost his job over not acting robustly enough with regard to the paedophile's friend in his circle. And King Charles is not facing any real problems at all at the moment with regards to not acting robustly enough with regards to the paedophile's friend in his family and in his business, his firm, his organ. So, I mean, that is probably just deference, is it? Is that just forelock tugging? I don't know. You can answer that question. But in response to the question of why we don't... Because even the Mandelson story didn't kick on for Starmer until the revelations regarding the alleged sharing of sensitive information kicked in. Being friends with a paedophile wasn't enough. And that means that the survivors of abuse aren't enough. They're less important than financial secret sharing. They're less important. That's awful, isn't it? That's awful. I've got a racist and an idiot for you in my inbox this morning, if you're interested, just to lighten the tone. Here's the racist. Can we have exactly the same phone-in on the proliferation of Asian grooming gangs? Writes a racist, because we've been having those phone-ins since 2011, mate. Oh, you could be forgiven for not listening, but you couldn't be forgiven for not hearing me reference the similarities between these two phenomena just 20 minutes ago. But you only care when they're brown, you see? You don't care when they're white. Which makes you both a racist and a paedophile apologist, which is an extraordinary thing to have chalked up on your CV by 10:36 on a Wednesday morning. And I also have an idiot for you, who doesn't realise that I can see the history of their messages. So I'll read what they had to say about Keir Starmer finding himself in this position, and then what he had to say about King Charles finding himself in this position, without knowing that I'd be able to see both of them when they messaged me to say, is your middle name Hindsight? So stand by for Robin Maidenhead's arrival in Idiot's Corner in about 5 minutes' time. Before that, much more importantly, why? Why do we look away? Why don't we care more? Why don't we ever really see our actions living up to our words or our rhetoric? And, to go back to our racist friend with the grooming gangs, when Kemi Badenoch tried to make great political capital out of it earlier this year, she completely ignored, last year, the fact that her own government had commissioned Alexis Jay, who I saw the other night at the Houses of Parliament, to investigate child sexual abuse over across countless categories. My own school is mentioned. It has its own flipping file in the child sexual abuse inquiry report. My school has its own file. It's like church, institutions, sport, everywhere. But you only really find a certain kind of politician expressing concern when the perpetrators are from a certain background or a certain ethnicity. There's a word for that, of course. It's racist, very simply. And then, of course, what they do is, they call us racist for caring. And say, no, we call you racist for not caring about all the other victims, for not caring about the boys at my school, for not caring about the victims of priests, for not caring this week about the victims of rich white men. And why? Why don't we care? We constantly say that we do. Why don't we? Tanya's in Reading. Tanya, what would you like to say?
Hi, James.
Hello, Tanya.
Sorry, very, very nervous because I've never done anything like this before.
Take your time.
But very quickly, my story is I was sexually abused from a family friend from 4 till I was 10.
I'm so
Not
sorry.
really realising
Of course.
what was wrong, what was happening to me, and threats, the usual thing that happens with these types of people.
Yes.
When I was early 20s, I decided to actually come out and tell people, because it was affecting my life so badly, I had to sort of say something. And I did, and wasn't believed.
By whom?
By my father, by the person's wife that...
I'm so sorry.
By a doctor, by everything. I mean, I went to a doctor and the first thing they said is, well, what do you want me to do about it? You know, and that was... When you've had something hidden in you for so long that's so bad, to not be believed is sort of the worst thing possible. And you're saying to me about the king, etc., etc.
Yeah.
And if you go back to people that have happened, that this has happened to, i.e. myself, what you want is ownership. You don't want any money, you don't want anything like that. You want that person to own up that that's what he did to you, so people know. And I think what misses a lot with these sorts of things, of any sexual abuse as a young person, is that, yes, you're right, the person goes on for the rest of their life as a victim, and, you know, it completely messes with their head. I think about it every day. I'm not a screwed up person, but, you know, that's how you deal with it.
Did anybody believe you?
My partner at the time did.
Okay.
Yeah, my partner at the time did. But, as I say, if you ask the victims of all what's gone on with the Epstein thing, I would say a majority of them would say, I just want it to be, this is actually what happened, and I want them to own up to it. And I think with the king, he's obviously got a brother, and forgive me for saying it, who must be a prolific liar. And he obviously can't get to the bottom of it. But I feel that...
Well, forgive me, this is a cheeky question. Will you let me ask you a cheeky question?
Yeah, of course.
Would you have mounted the same defence of Keir Starmer last week? Because Peter Mandelson is also a prolific liar.
He is a prolific liar, but, I mean, I'm not particularly a supporter of Starmer.
No, sure.
But I like him as a person, actually. I don't think he's a bad person. I think he's actually quite a nice guy. I think he's probably in a job that is a bit too much for him.
We've veered off, haven't we? But you're right. I'm just pointing out that...
What I'm saying is, I think we've gone way too much to blame Starmer because it's easy. Yeah. It's easy to blame him because we can get an instant result, or more or less an instant result. But when you're dealing with people of a higher profile, and the person that abused me was of a higher profile, it's worse for the victim because you don't get believed because, like, going back to the gentleman you said about earlier when you started about him not washing his mouth out and all that type of terrible things, because I don't think people can deal with it. They just don't know what
it compounds.
Say.
I don't know if you... First of all, I'm so sorry for what you've been through twice, for going through the abuse and then for having the abuse compounded by the scepticism of people that you should have been able to trust and rely on. I can only imagine how awful that is, and I'm glad to hear you're doing so well. Did you hear a call we took last week or the week before from Margaret in Catterick, who's stumbled across images of child sexual abuse on her then husband's computer?
Gosh, no, I didn't. No.
She was an extraordinary woman, and she made me afterwards not feel ashamed, but feel somewhat enlightened by my initial reaction in that moment, because she went straight to the authorities. She didn't give him the opportunity to make excuses. She didn't entertain the possibility that it had happened somehow by accident or someone had interfered with his hard disk. She is a magnificent woman. We've spoken to her twice.
Wow,
But how many people would do that, Tanya? Because
they wouldn't.
No, because what she discovered was a hand grenade. in the middle of her life, and she pulled the pin.
It is, and I think, unfortunately, again, in my experience, women are almost as bad, because I was then threatened by her because I was making up lies.
Because you were going to pull a pin. You were going to pull a pin in the middle of her life. And they just keep the pin in. That's what the king said. Keep the pin in. Whether he said it in such terms or not, I don't know. But that's what everybody does, whether they're running a church, whether it's the Archbishop of Canterbury or the headmaster of a school or the chief, scoutmaster or whatever it is. Keep the pin in. Call the crisis management people. Keep the pin in. There's an ineluctable logic to that, but there's no morality at all.
No, there isn't. And it just feels that, and you say it quite often, and I always, every day, when you talk about this sort of thing, I'm in tears, because you go back to the victim.
Yes.
No, it's about the victim as such.
Always.
There's so many of us around, and it's like the person that's the abuser is more important, in whatever way that might be, than the person that's been abused.
I guess that, and that's, part of the profile problem, isn't it? I mean, if you're a bit racist, you're going to pretend to be outraged by the actions of brown perpetrators. If you're a bit deferential, you're going to be excusing the actions of privileged perpetrators. And the bigger the perpetrator, the bigger their profile, the bigger their status, the bigger the pin. The more, the more ramifications there will be for blowing that whistle, for pulling that pin. It's pulling a... Thank you, Tanya. I'm sorry that you... we're in a position to make this call. I think you know what I mean by that, but thank you for your courage, actually. 10:45 is the time, and as often happens, as always happens when we address these kind of issues, a lot of people offering their love and support for you, Tanya, but also sharing similar experiences and echoing precisely what you say about the thing of not being believed. Not being believed. I should mention that the Samaritans are available for anybody affected by any of the issues we're discussing, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You can find them online, or you can call them on 116 123. Should probably mention that the bloke whose lies saw all sorts of coverage and ramifications got released from jail this week. Carl Beach, called a fantasist, although that word is a little bit inadequate, and he, of course, was believed. He came along shortly after the grooming gang scandals had gathered momentum, shortly after Jimmy Savile's story, shortly after my school friends had stepped forward to be abused. And a lot of people, including the Metropolitan Police, including an awful lot of journalists, myself among them. The Daily Mail was boasting at the time about how, when the Metropolitan Police described his allegations as credible and true, it was a victory for them. It was a victory for the truth and months of hard work. How quickly we forget. But I worry sometimes that part of the reason why some people use him as an example more than they ever talk about actual victims of actual abuse is part of the keeping the pin in. So if someone comes forward and he's believed and he turns out to be a liar, if you're dedicated to keeping the pin in the grenade, you're going to want people to talk about him a hell of a lot more than they talk about Virginia Giuffre, for example, or a hell of a lot more than they talk about the victims of any paedophilic abuse, whether it's happening in takeaway restaurants in Rotherham or whether it's happening on private islands owned by billionaires and visited by some of the richest and most privileged people on the planet. Keep the pin in the grenade.
James O'Brien on LBC.
You're right, Christine. It takes so much courage to phone in about such traumatic events. Love to Tina, indeed. Let me do some housework before we carry on with this conversation. There's a lot to get through today. We've done something quite weird. We stumbled into... Henry Riley and I are always stumbling into things by accident. We stumbled in to the curious relationship between erotic novelists and Reform UK councillors. We stumbled into all sorts of things together over the years. And we stumbled into something entirely accidentally this week. We've stumbled into what would happen if Nigel Farage's party was treated by the UK media in the same way that the Labour Party is. And we had 4 stories on Monday that would be absolutely huge if it was happening in the Labour Party. And we had 4 stories yesterday. 4 more stories. That adds up to 8, Keith. 8 stories so far this week, possibly 9. I may have had 5 yesterday. And so I thought, well, we've shot that bolt now. That's the end of that feature. I think we've got 4 more. So I don't know what we're going to call it. We call it the Farage Files or something like that. What would happen if a radio programme, if a member of the UK media spent a week treating Farage's shower with the same level of scrutiny that the Daily Mail treats the Labour Party? Is that a good way of putting it? What would happen if Farage was actually properly scrutinised? If his party was properly reported and investigated? And we're finding out this week we could hit 12, possibly lucky 13 stories, all about the same political party and all negative. So tune in to Henry Riley and the Farage Files at 11:30 today. And then PMQs, of course, with Natasha. And then, here's a story you possibly might be able to help me with moving forward. Don't you hate that phrase? Moving forward. It's completely redundant. And you never move backwards, do you? You may be able to help me with a story that I'm covering yesterday. Moving forward, you may be able to help me with a story that I'm covering in the future, therefore move... Anyway, sorry, pet hate. Call me out, will you, Keith, if I ever say moving forward again. I think that there are more cases than are currently being reported of people being refused entry into the United States of America for no apparent reason. Financial Times on its front page yesterday had a story about people turning up at the embassy for what they thought was a formality, people who have actually got lives in the United States of America, but because of minor indiscretions or crimes on their record, they were, for the first time ever, being refused entry. And I have 2 stories from my personal life which I can't talk to because they want desperately to get home to the United States of America, but I'm aware of 2 people who don't have, or at least who assure me that they don't have any criminal record whatsoever, and I've got no reason to doubt them because I don't know them from that period of my life. I know them from the other periods of my life. Who have actually just turned up at the embassy expecting a rubber stamping and being told no, sorry. And I don't know how we're going to do it. I mean, you could email me probably, james@lbc.co. Does anyone ever look at that email account? Do you ever look at it? james@lbc.co.uk. Well, should we use that one? We can't set up another email account and then forget all about it. But if you are in that, if it's you, I don't want second or third hand stories. I've got them already. If you are in that zone, if you have been refused entry into the United States of America despite living there or having worked and paid taxes there without any trouble whatsoever in the recent past, then just email james@lbc.co.uk and have a look at contributing to a broader report on it. There may be nothing there. You know, my news antennae, they're rubbish. But you never know. And at 12:30 we'll be speaking to the lawyer rather, for an Irish fella who has been in detention as a consequence of ICE for 5 months despite not having done anything wrong, up to and including immigration offences. 5 months. It's Kafkaesque. There's another overused word, but not on this occasion. It's completely accurate. And the editor of the Daily Mail, the man whose columnist hounded Lucy Meadows to an early grave, or at least that's one interpretation of events that a coroner referred to when her inquest was conducted with regards to what Dick Littlejohn, the Daily Mail columnist, had written about her. The man responsible for attacking our independent judiciary with the Enemies of the People headline. He's in court at the moment complaining about being deeply hurt about things. The man who, of course, greenlit, indeed commissioned the attack upon Ed Miliband's dead father, the war hero Ralph Miliband, described as the man who hates Britain. The man who painted targets on the back of countless MPs by calling them saboteurs and sticking Crush the Saboteurs on the front page of the Daily Mail, is in the High Court at the moment asking for sympathy. Sorry. He's in the High Court at the moment asking for sympathy and complaining about being deeply hurt by something some people have said about him. We'll be catching up with events in the High Court where that case continues in the next hour of the programme as well. 10:55 is the time. Maggie is in Southampton. Maggie, back to the rather more serious matter in hand. What would you like to say?
Hello, James.
Hello, Maggie.
I mean, basically, it goes back to patriarchy, and that's a very glib thing to say. But when I think back to my time in the 60s when I was growing up as a young woman, as an adolescent, we were basically told the message was you're either a good woman or you're a bad woman. You can be one or the other. And a good woman didn't have sex outside marriage, but a bad woman would have sex with anyone. And the roots of that in our Christian culture are you're either the Virgin Mary or you're Mary Magdalene. And it's one or the other. And that has hung on.
Even now, I mean, I took I went to a monastic school. I was raised by, my sex education came from men in dresses who'd taken a vow of celibacy. So I'm fairly well versed in the hypocrisy of religious doctrines on this front. But so we're victim blaming effectively in these sort of cases. We're just thinking, well, there's no smoke without fire. High Court judges in our lifetime would question the length of a rape victim's skirt as a possible incitement to sexual assault, and we saw it with the grooming gangs in the northern and Midland cities. The idea that they are not actually victims; they are complicit in their own abuse.
They're temptresses.
Temptresses.
Because their sexuality is obvious. And once a woman or a girl of 12 or 9 or whatever it is has had sex, she falls into that category. And I speak advisedly because I'm a retired psychotherapist and also a retired probation officer.
Right.
So I've seen it from both sides. I've worked with perpetrators and survivors. And, that hasn't gone away, apart from amazing times of feminism. It feels like it's going backwards now.
Well, all the isms do, don't they? I was recording a full disclosure with Sadiq Khan yesterday, and we were talking about how it feels as if progress on race relations and racism is going backwards. Sexism, misogyny and racism are always hand in hand, aren't they, historically and culturally?
They? Yeah.
And when Trump boasts about grabbing women by the vagina, and doesn't suffer any particular punishment for that, and people like Nigel Farage come out to defend him and sort of snigger that it was just locker room talk, they're proving your point quite perfectly.
Absolutely. And the more power and the more money a man has. Yeah.
And that's why we look away. That's why we move along. That's why we want to keep the pin in. So that's part of it, keep the pin in the grenade. The other part of it is we literally don't care enough about the survivors and the victims because we don't care about the survivors and the victims.
And I think a lot of that comes from fear of female sexuality. Because if you can keep women locked in their box, whether it's marriage or being pure or whatever it is, you don't have to worry that they have their desires as well.
Do you know what I use? I mean, you're obviously on the money and you're speaking with a much wider breadth of knowledge than I have, but I remember dealing with low-level misogyny when I was younger, and there was often a resentment. It really blew up later, actually, with so-called incels, the sort of involuntary celibacy movement, which is very far-right adjacent and therefore actually also goes hand-in-hand often with racism. But this fury that a man can only ever have sex if a woman decides to, quotes, let him, end quotes. That turns into a hatred of women because they're not having any sex. And that's why you want to subjugate a woman. You want to go back to the days when it was not a crime. It was the crime of raping your wife did not exist. In art, you know this, but a lot of people listening may not.
Until the 1990s, would you believe?
Yeah, 20 years into my lifetime, 20-odd years into my lifetime, you could not actually face criminal sanction for raping your wife because it was philosophically impossible under British jurisprudence to be. And you see it in the trad wife movement in America. And I don't know if you saw... here's a phrase that sums up everything you're talking about. Woody Allen's wife and stepdaughter, which isn't a riddle. It's the same person. Her apparent or alleged communications with Jeffrey Epstein, talking about another man who'd... I don't know what phrase to use. I nearly said got into trouble with a 15-year-old girl, but that's the language of patriarchy, isn't it? A man who was accused of abusing a 15-year-old girl, and in this email she was expressing how angry she was with the 15-year-old girl for tempting him. And
Andrew's ex-girlfriend who said that anybody who wasn't in the Epstein files was a loser.
It's on Tom's show. I don't know if... I saw that clip, actually. I don't know if he ever went out with Lady Victoria Harvey, who clearly has issues all of her own, but yes.
She's described as an ex-girlfriend.
Is she? Oh, okay. Yeah. No, fair enough. That's me being the world's worst gossip columnist because I was on duty at the time of that relationship, I think. But yeah, you're right. I mean, you can't uphold the patriarchy without the support of women you could generously describe as victims of it, or gaslit victims of it, or just Ghislaine Maxwell, most obviously, completely complicit members of it and contributors to it. I don't understand that any more than you do, Maggie, but I suspect you're your understanding probably goes further than mine. It is 1 minute after 11. You are listening to James O'Brien on LBC.
James O'Brien on LBC.
5 minutes after 11 is the time. Look, this is how deference works. And I think today it qualifies you for entry into Idiot's Corner. So when we are, as we have been today, talking about the King's abject failure to do enough to rein in his brother Andrew's relationship with Jeffrey Epstein long after Epstein was established as a paedophile and criminal. Remember, it was only in March of 2022 that they gave £12 million to a woman alleging that he had raped her. A decision taken largely to keep the case out of court. And there's no earthly way that Charles would not have been absolutely party to that process or that decision. By then, he was effectively running what they call the firm. Think of him as the CEO of the firm, while the Queen was the sort of emeritus chairman or chairman of the business. So everything would filter up to her ultimately, but the day-to-day running of the royal family was being done by King Charles. And even if it wasn't, he didn't try to stop it. He didn't do it. Anyway, when we're talking about Keir Starmer not doing enough to stop Peter Mandelson, Robin Maidenhead writes, this is from last Friday, isn't it enough that he failed to foresee and avert the development of a scandal whilst having the means to do so? ? When you're talking about the King behaving arguably much worse for, well, not even arguably, much worse for much longer with regard to his family member, Rob takes a rather different view. When most of the King's brothers' awful things were done, they were just the Prince of Wales and the Duke of York. Andrew was an independent man, not under the supervision of Charles. The timing of the now King's actions followed a natural and acceptable course. Doff cap tug forelock. So you take patriarchy, which is obviously the biggest answer to the question that I'm asking. A horrible analysis, but absolutely irrefutable, that we heard just before the news. You see it in the grooming gangs, populated by predominantly men of Pakistani heritage. You see it in the sexual abuse visited upon Jeffrey Epstein and his friends and colleagues' victims. You see it everywhere you go. You see it in high courts when the length of miniskirts was cited by judges as a possible reason why a woman had been raped, because she was asking for it. Everywhere you go, you've got this quasi-religious. In fact, I can tell you precisely zero surprises. The woman that the last caller was just referring to is the ex-girlfriend of Prince Andrew, who told Tom Swarbrick on LBC last week that if you weren't in the Epstein files, you were a loser. No prizes for guessing which political figure she currently supports. All right, well, no prizes for guessing, but I might actually introduce a little bit of tension. No, of course not. It's Nigel Farage, the bloke who thinks it's fine to go around grabbing women by their private parts, or at least it's fine to boast about it. As we've said a million times on this programme, misogyny and racism are, if not twins, then certainly very, very close cousins. So you've got the patriarchy at the heart of it, and the blaming, the demonisation, the othering of women. But loads of us don't feel that we're part of that problem, and we don't really do enough either. Have we all been gaslit? Covering these stories, the Fleet Street waking up to the gravity of the situation regarding Starmer and Mandelson only when financial information was brought into the mix. It wasn't quite enough. Well, it was nowhere near enough. Keir Starmer, a man who has dedicated much of his career to pursuing abusers of women and girls, not sufficiently disturbed by Mandelson's continuing friendship with a paedophile to have excluded him from the possibility of becoming ambassador. But we're not disturbed in... That's a different question, isn't it? Why don't we care more? Answer that question and tell me what the answer to this slightly different question is. Why aren't we more disturbed by these? Why wasn't Keir Starmer more disturbed by Mandelson's friendship with Epstein? Why weren't you? Why wasn't King Charles more disturbed? Disturbed to the point of doing something that might have been damaging to the brand, of breaking ranks and saying no. No, we're not paying £12 million. You will go to court and face these accusations. You will know. We're not disturbed enough by it, are we? I don't know why. I'd like to think I was. I'd like to think I am disturbed enough by it, but I can't be, can I? And otherwise we'd have talked about it sooner, wouldn't we? Would we? Alice is in Peterborough. Alice, what would you like to say?
Oh, good morning, James.
Hello, Alice.
Hello. Oh, I'm very nervous all of a sudden, sorry.
It's only me.
Yeah, that's why I'm nervous.
Take your time.
So I suppose for me, we don't care and we're not disturbed because it makes us uncomfortable. We hear these women and their stories, me being one of them, sadly.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. And it makes us very uncomfortable. So I was sexually assaulted in the military, another big patriarchal institution.
God, they don't come much bigger, do they, really?
No. And people don't want to hear it. They do not want to hear about what happened to me and that it even happened, because it shakes their foundations of their beliefs, of tradition in this country, of what is going on behind those barbed wire fences. They don't want to hear that it could be that, because it's so gross. And I think it's that. I think it's because it makes people uncomfortable.
So you've got, and this feels, I don't know whether it feels inappropriate or more appropriate as a context of the military, but you've got the keep the pin in element of it, don't?
Yeah.
Because this would blow up loads of people who had nothing to do with the actual act of abuse. It would, the ripples go far. But you've also got the corollary of disgust, which is, I don't want to look at it. I am disgusted, but I'd rather not look at it. I'd rather, and that, I'm not making excuses for the mothers who told their sons to shut up when they revealed that they were being abused by priests, but it's more than just keeping the pin in it. It's also protecting yourself from horrible feelings, which is probably a natural response. It's why Margaret in Catterick, I don't know if you heard her call, is such an extraordinary woman, because the minute she found these images on her then husband's computer, she just yanked the pin.
The dinner party lady,
That's the dinner party lady. I've got a feeling she might quite like that, actually, as a label. But that most of us probably wouldn't do that, would we, when presented with...
No, and in my experience, even very close family members, we have never spoken about it because they can't accept that this horrible thing happened somewhere that should be so revered and seen as a good thing in our society. And the military protect us. They don't hurt their own citizens. They don't hurt each other.
And the royal family are supposed to be the best of us, or if they are scumbags, then it makes an entire mockery of all of our social mores and hierarchies, doesn't it? If you've got a scumbag very, very near the very top, what does it say about our entire society? So shut up, close the door, pay her off and move away.
Yeah, but I think people are disgusted. I think people do care. They just can't do it openly. They have to shut the door.
It's, I mean, not to labour the patriarchy. Well, I don't think you can labour the patriarchy point, because all roads lead there ultimately. But most women know this, I think.
Yeah.
What you're describing, don't they?
We do, yeah. Absolutely. I think you say it lots of times when you talk about these subjects. I know the women won't be surprised, and women callers tend not to phone in because we just think, we know all this. We've been trying to tell you what is happening to us, and you're not acting like you care, even if behind closed doors with your wife, your daughter, whatever, that you're saying that it's very important that it stops and doesn't happen. You're not saying that to the wider group of women. You're not coming out to bat for us. You're not protecting us.
Just to be clear, you're generalising now about men. You're not having a go at me.
I am, absolutely. No, I listen to you every day, James. I think you're great.
Thank you. I don't know if that was fair to clarify that, but I've always got the image in my mind, Alice, of someone who's just turned the radio on and they'll be thinking, blimey, she's tearing a strip off, James. I thought he did quite well in this field. I thought he was he tried at least his best to make sure that these conversations are had more widely, and indeed, as I think we've proved today, and Alice would, I think, agree, the conversations conducted almost entirely, with women. And it is one of those subjects where it happened to me during Me Too, and I have a wife and daughters. I don't have sons. And I was shocked by some of the stuff that came out in Me Too, and I'm not sure I've ever felt more ridiculous in my life. I don't want to use the word shame, but I will use the word ridiculous. I don't think I've ever felt more ridiculous in my life, that things my own wife had told me hadn't resonated or registered as much as they should have done. And because of the age that they were and are, it was a cusp moment with my daughters, and I look at them in public spaces very differently from how I would have looked at my wife 10 or 15 years ago. Now I look at them the same in public spaces, and what every woman knows, most men don't, because you're either perpetrator or head in the sand. You're either a perpetrator of inappropriate or offensive or illegal behaviour, or you're a minimiser. And most of us are minimisers. Partly, I think, because of that thing that goes hand in hand with the keeping the pin in the grenade. And contemplating the fact that all men, or at least lots and lots of men, are potentially disgusting is a pretty horrible thing for a man to contemplate. Women don't need to, they know it, but men think that they somehow get tarred with the same brush, or that they become adjacent to the issue. So you go, oh, no, don't be, it can't be. So that's why you get these slightly ridiculous hashtags like not all men. They come from a relatively good place, but not a particularly important one, unless you're a man in a patriarchy, in which case your feelings and your thoughts are more important than everything else, up to and including victims of patriarchal abuse. And anyway, that's the end of my TED Talk.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It is 18 minutes after 11. Henry Riley on the way in a moment with the latest instalment of the latest episode of our investigation into what happens when you treat Nigel Farage's outfit with the same level of scrutiny that the Daily Mail treats the Labour Party. I didn't think this would be still running on Wednesday, but if anything, it's looking like it might reach the end of the week. And just in case you are confused or sceptical about that description of misogyny and sexism and racism always being, at the very least, bedfellows and quite possibly handmaidens. This sadly is unsigned, but a text comes in response to some of the incredibly powerful radio that you've been listening to. It says, James, this is lazy journalism, simply word soup. And this time last week they were messaging to say, deport all the migrants, vote reform. So, again, it's amazing, isn't it, that people keep providing me with all the proof I need to tie together the racism and the sexism that is typified by political figures like Nigel Farage, who, of course, defended Donald Trump when he boasted about grabbing women by their private parts. I think the word I used earlier was technically incorrect, anatomically incorrect, wasn't it? But I certainly can't use the word that Donald Trump used because... well, I just wouldn't anyway, even without the auspices of Ofcom keeping a close eye and on everything we do. And God bless Ofcom and all who sail in her. 11:19 is the time. Elaine is in Richmond to steer us back to this question of caring enough and making all the right noises, but when push comes to shove, never, whether it's Keir Starmer or the King, never actually doing the right thing until you absolutely have to. Elaine, what would you like to say?
Oh, hello. Yeah, I came in at the beginning of the programme with your statement of why don't we care, and have you noticed that this morning you've only had callers from women?
Well, Carl in Tetbury is up next. I don't want to scare him off, but yes, I do. I take your point. Yes, I take your point.
And the only person who sent you a text that you read out was in support of the King, with regard to his brother. That was a male perspective.
Yes, Robin Maidenhead. He was attacking Keir Starmer last week, but he was defending the King this morning.
Well, there you go. So I just put... I mean, the last caller before the break, you pretty much said a lot of what I was going to say about patriarchy and misogyny, violence against women, the church against women, you know. I mean, I think it's a simple fact that women care all the time. People like me have been a very active person in feminism, I think, without being too heavy-booted through my whole life. And I think people despair and they can't see a way for it to change from the media portrayals of things, from boots on the ground, men walking by you when you're having a tough day and they go, smile, love,
cheer up, love,
your face, you know.
Yeah.
It's
constant. Let me read you this from Jenny. Women know this. We are fair game as soon as we go through puberty. There is a kind of vile tacit agreement that this isn't really paedophilia. If the victims had been younger, perhaps the response would be different. Everybody has a sort of threshold of what they are disgusted by, and this scandal does not meet that threshold for a huge number of people. And it is a male-female divide, really. I mean, not...
There really, really is, James. I mean, it's absolutely massive. I have a 30-year-old daughter, and the way men are behaving towards her on public transport, the comments, the way she's treated in the workplace, the way dating, at the moment, men treating women in dating. I mean, I'm so worried about her future.
I'm sorry to hear that. We've gone backwards in the last 10 years.
On a daily basis, we've gone backwards. I felt I was born in 57, and I felt that we'd moved forward.
Well,
and
we had.
We had. And I remember a conversation with colleagues one day saying, isn't it funny now, you literally don't get a guy whistling from a building site or from a van, and that's all changed. In fact, they chat to you nicely when you walk by. I remember saying out loud that things had improved from the ground up and from the top down. And now I think we've regressed terribly of late.
On all these fronts.
The world order, the male dominance of Trump, Epstein, Gates, Musk, all these people, the wealth, the billionaires. I think everything's interlinked, isn't it, James?
I think it is. Some days more than others, but today very much. It's not a coincidence, is it? That yesterday I'm sitting down with Sadiq Khan for full disclosure, and he's talking about the N-word and the P-word being more or less excised from public discourse in the course of his lifetime. Things that were shouted at him and his friends when they were young, which then we had a 15, 20-year period where it was almost unimaginable, and now we're back. Now it's happening again, thanks to the rise of political forces that we track quite closely on this programme, and they're, of course, in the box seat on both sides of the Atlantic. And I don't know about... It's not my place, really. It's fine for people to remind us of that strange woman who Tom Swarbrick was talking to last week, but it's not my place to answer this question, but I think I can ask it. Why do women go along with... Why do some women go along with it and become complicit in it? Not to the point of Ghislaine Maxwell or this strange Hervey woman that Tom spoke to, but to the point of... I remember taking a call years ago, Elaine, from somebody older than us, telling me that she used to be flattered when men pinched her bottom in the office, and it really sort of stuck with me, that idea, because she was nice and sensible and yet somehow bonkers at the same time. So why do some women go along with it? Do we know?
I wish I knew. That's one of the questions that... I mean, the Ghislaine Maxwell thing is just... I'm sorry to say it. I think it's off the charts. I think some people, male or female, are just evil, frankly. Unfortunately. Can I just say one really quick thing with the link that you've been talking about, the royal family?
Yes, absolutely.
I mean, are you honestly, or are people honestly expecting more from this royal family, with their history, with their personal history, with Charles's history? Do you know, I mean, are we forgetting how he's behaved?
Well, he was an adulterer. He cheated on his wife, and she cheated on him. But that doesn't lay the groundwork, does it, for failing to act responsibly or robustly enough with regards to
I think their morals need to be questioned all the way through history, and especially the last 100 years.
Well, we can't. Well, I'd start with Charles I.
Well, okay, let's go back. But honestly, are we expecting the royal family and the institution, the firm, you call it, to actually step down in any way? They're clinging on. We've got men all over the world clinging on to power. And that's what we have. And the answer to why we don't speak out, it's a very difficult situation. My daughter was in a work situation, a very important, one of her first jobs. Yes. And an older colleague was just talking filth in her ear whenever she was in his proximity. God. And it grew and it grew and it grew. And she didn't know what to do. She wanted the job. She didn't know who to speak to because he was senior to her. And she put up with it for a period of time, and then she just, unfortunately for her career, she just left the job.
Well, I can't put up with this anymore, and I've got no confidence whatsoever.
But then she didn't feel that anybody around her, because she saw people laughing at comments that he would make and all of that, and she thought, I literally can't identify the person here that I would walk to say, this is how he speaks to me, this is what the intimidation and the sexism and misogyny is to me. And she didn't know, and I didn't find out till later and being quite a forthright person, maybe more than her, I was furious. I was like, well, it's not too late to go back. And she said, if I open up that can of worms, how long will that be for me to go through procedures to make retrospective, complaints, this, that and the other? I need to be healthy, mentally healthy, and I need to move on with my life. And I know she feels a bit of a sense of guilt about not pointing that out. I know she does. But I felt so sorry for her in a really important step in her life for this to be destroyed by one man.
And to be powerless in the face of it.
Well, she felt she was. She's normally very outspoken, but she was floored by it. Absolutely floored.
And exhausted.
Yeah, tired to have to fight her corner in that way when she was just trying to present and do a good job.
Exactly that. I'm sorry to hear that.
It's just... I've got one other little thing. It's just a tidbit at the end. When I was being driven home...
Let me just remind everybody, you're listening to The Elaine Show on LBC.
I'm sorry.
News bulletin coming as if I'd come on.
I was kept waiting.
Pot kettle, Elaine. I can hardly have a go at anybody else for talking a lot, can I? Go on, fill your boots.
Well, yeah. My father had a colleague at work, and I was at school sitting at the desk next to his daughter. Yeah. My father was quite high up in a local company in a small town, and his colleague was the father of one of my friends at school, my best friends. And we lived away from the school, and we used to get lifts home from school when it rained. And on 2 or 3 occasions, he asked me to sit in the front seat. I was about 12. And he touched my leg 2 or 3 times and said I had lovely eyes and things like that. And it was a bit peculiar. And then it happened 2 or 3 times, and I went home, and my father was an old school guy, but I actually mentioned it to him in the kitchen while we were making tea. And about a week later, my friend came into school and said, we've got to move because my dad's been sacked.
Wow.
And we can't afford our house. He's lost his job. And I went home that night, and my dad came home from work quite late, worked very, very hard, and walked into the kitchen. And I looked at him, and he looked at me, and we didn't say a word. And he just looked at me, and I said, I can't name her.
No, of course.
They're moving house. And he went, yes, and that's all for the best, isn't it? And that was never mentioned again. He literally went back into the workplace, whatever excuse he used, and he sacked him.
Good grief.
And that's one of the really strong memories of my dad. He was a very authoritarian person. We didn't have a brilliant relationship, but he
knew what was right. He knew he had lines. He had red lines.
He had red lights. I mentioned it to him. I saw his face change.
Gosh.
And that's what happened within a week. And I felt sorry for my friend and this man's wife.
He pulled the pin.
He just got him. He
pulled
the
pin out of the grenade, didn't he?
He did.
Albeit that the grenade didn't really go off in your lives. It could have done. I mean, he could have had ramifications. Certainly, appeals or what. God, what an incredible story. Thank you. I'm glad I didn't interrupt you. I'm glad I didn't interrupt you or make you hurry up. That was a bit of a shivery story, that. Probably all dads really should do that, but how many of us could state with absolute confidence that we would? Because when push comes to shove, and for the avoidance of doubt, I'm very happy to report I've never been in a situation like Elaine's father, but how many of us can say with absolute certainty that we wouldn't prioritise keeping the pin in the grenade, depending on where that explosion took us, took our lives, took our families, took our loved ones, took our livelihoods? How many of us would prioritise putting the pin in? You don't know the answer to that question, any more than you won't know the answer to the question I asked you yesterday, which I'm going to ask you again, because who goes Nazi? That incredible Dorothy Thompson article, I think from the late 30s in Harper's Magazine in the United States of America, which could not be more timely. Because as we talk about the reversal of progress in all of these areas, racism many days, sexism today, misogyny, abuse. We talk about the erosion of standards, the triumphs, if you like, of what many people called political correctness with a sneer in their voice. But political correctness was all about closing down men like Elaine's friend's father, letting them know that their behaviour was unacceptable. It was all about removing words like the N-word or the P-word from public discourse when used as pejoratives or insults. It was all about shutting down unacceptable and unbearable behaviours that were never going to be suffered by the people who were perpetrating them. And it started going backwards again. Somebody asked me yesterday for a podcast I recorded, after interviewing Sadiq Khan for full disclosure, about whether or not you're hopeful, whether or not you think that the blips are the good periods and the normality is the bad periods. And you have to believe that the blips are the bad periods. You have to believe that we're all fundamentally decent, that reacting to child sex abuse today, an Afghan asylum seeker convicted of rape yesterday, and many people much, much, much more upset about that than they are about rapes committed by men who look more like them. You have to believe that ultimately humanity will prevail and that we are fundamentally decent and equable, because if you don't believe that, you might as well give up and go home. It's 11:32. Dominic Ellis has your headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC.
11:35 is the time. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. You can tell that things have happened on the programme when I start dreaming up titles for segments. Unfortunately, two things happen when I dream up a title for a segment. The first is, well, one of two things happen. The first is I immediately forget about it and it disappears, or I get very excited and order a jingle that takes 9 months to arrive because everybody's too busy giving the newsagents whatever it is they've asked for recently, and I have completely lost all sense of enthusiasm by the time the jingle finally arrives. But anyway, we're thinking of calling this the Farage Files, because Henry Riley and I have this week stumbled into an investigation into what would happen if we treated Nigel Farage's outfit in the same way that the Daily Mail treats it, well, in the same way that the Daily Mail and most of the UK media treats the Labour Party. We had 4 stories on Monday. We had 4 stories yesterday. We've probably run out of stories by today, Henry.
5.
You sound like Len Goodman.
Yeah, sorry, yeah. 7? No, 5 stories today. Sorry, that was a bit much, wasn't it? Yeah, I mean...
take it away, Maestro.
Okay, well, let's go first with working from home, which was obviously a conversation on LBC yesterday and today. This rally that Nigel Farage gave in Birmingham's, he said, quotes, "People aren't more productive working at home. It's a load of nonsense. They're more productive being with fellow human beings."
How does he know? He hasn't had a job since he joined UKIP.
He said they're more productive being with fellow human beings and working as part of a team. You can't go on the sick because you've got mild anxiety. Anyway, he went on and said, yeah, people aren't productive working at home. But we found 2 jobs by Reform UK in the last couple of months, one that's still active that do have home working. As
his own outfit?
Yes, working for Reform. So one current job vacancy, James, in case you're interested, is Regional Director for Reform South Central Region. It carries a 50 grand salary. Okay. And the location is home working with occasional travel within the region.
Right.
There's a second job.
Who's he going to blame for this?
This second's job is on Grab Jobs. It's just closed. It was for something previously, but that was a remote / work from home job to be a by-election manager for the party.
So that's the only... I mean, there could be more, but we've only spent about 10 minutes looking, and those are two jobs that are currently being advertised in his own outfit. Yeah, that involve working from home while he is simultaneously making strange speeches at strange rallies about why he would abolish working from home. I mean, there's nothing to stop him abolishing working from home in his own company, is there?
No, nothing to stop him.
But he hasn't.
Well, according to these job adverts, no. One of them's still up, one of them has closed, happy to be clear, but one of them is still up.
Have you applied?
No.
You go undercover?
No.
If you shaved your moustache off.
Yeah, I don't know. There's not much to shave off, to be honest. Other stories, James. Let's go to the Russia debate that took place in Parliament. Yes. Yeah, this was on Monday. It's because of a petition, that carried 114,000 signatures and demanded a public inquiry into the sort of relationship with Russia across the political spectrum.
You'd expect, I mean, Farage wants to make things absolutely crystal clear that Nathan Gill, his very close friend and protégé and the leader of his party in Wales, who was convicted and sent to jail for taking bribes from a Kremlin stooge for essentially injecting propaganda talking points into public discourse. Farage must be very keen to distance himself from this. Did he speak at it, or was he just in the audience?
No, I mean, it was well attended, but there was no Reform UK MP. They've now got 8 who attended that debate.
The 30p Lee?
No, none of them attended this.
The woman driven mad by black faces on television adverts?
Sarah Pocham was not at the debate, They've been accused of pandering to Russia.
Remember any others? Who
by
are the others?
one Labour MP. It was Sarah Pochin, Lee Anderson, Danny Kruger.
Was Danny Kruger not there?
Danny Kruger wasn't there. Suella Braverman.
Was Suella Braverman there?
Suella Braverman wasn't there. Robert Jenrick.
So none of them were there?
None of them.
Okay. That's a shame.
But the government does have this independent Rycroft review that's set to publish next month, by the way. That was in the aftermath of the Nathan Gill sentencing, which is going to look at the relationship with Russia.
Of course, should remind our listeners that Vladimir Putin is the politician on this planet that Nigel Farage admires the most. It's important to distinguish him from Donald Trump, who is the bravest man that Nigel Farage has ever met. That's 2, as far as, if I'm keeping count correctly.
That's 2. You're a fan of your numbers. 3 is reform donation, which is this. I mean, this has been bubbling away for a little while. It's fairly complex, so stay with me. But it was initially broken by the Sunday Times, and the Financial Times now have done some reporting into it, because the senior Labour MP Liam Byrne, who chairs the Business Select Committee, has said Companies House needs to look at this. It all centres around a £200,000 donation to Reform UK. And links to an Iranian-born billionaire. That's Sashan Gandhari, who's a British citizen. Now, the donations are made by John Richard Simpson, who's a church warden and conveyancer, and he's listed as the person with control of this company, IAL Limited. As I say, but last year, £200,000 of donations to Reform UK. But there's now been links from that company that he's involved with and the Gandhari family. Now, they're important because they paid for Nigel Farage's recent trip to the World Economic Forum in Davos.
Oh, I see.
They also claim that Nigel Farage was an advisor to their organisation.
Yes.
Nigel Farage, spokesperson, categorically denies that, but did say that their
what were
company...
they paying for then?
Well, they did pay for Nigel Farage to be a delegate.
Yeah, but what do they get in return?
Well, that
if he's not advising them.
That's unclear. But they paid for Mr. Farage and a member of staff to go to the World Economic Forum. The IAL, the company, said that this church warden, John Richard Simpson, is the person with significant control. But they did confirm that the Gandhari family are clients of RAL Limited.
3.
Well, number 4...
Or 11, if we were to be covering the whole week.
4, 8, 9, 10, 11. Yeah, 11. So this would be number 12.
Carry on.
12, yeah. University Society. This is Bangor.
God damn humanities degrees, honestly.
No, it's social science after all, isn't it? This is a university of Bangor, or actually not the university, because this is a student debating society. Now, what happened here is it's caused a bit of a stooshy up in Wales, because Reform's head of policy, Zia Youssef, has now threatened to withhold funding from Bangor University after their student...
after winning power?
Well, yeah, after winning power. Not that he pulls the purse strings at the moment. The Student Debating Society there refused to host 2 figures from Reform UK, one of whom was Sarah Pochin, the MP who you referenced earlier on.
The one who's driven mad by blackfaces on the television.
Who made that comment and has apologised. Bangor University received £30 million in state funding a year. Zia Youssef said that much of that comes from Reform voting taxpayers. I wonder how they would feel being without it. However, Reform's Welsh branch, because they've got that new leader that we spoke about, Dan Thomas.
Do we know where he lives yet?
He claims to live in Wales but has an address in Bath and was leader and is a councillor in Barnet up until a few months ago. In Barnet, London. He has said that that's not Reform Party policy. They don't want to defund Bangor University. Now, to get expertise on this, I spoke earlier with Podrick Reedy, who is editor-at-large of The Lead. He, crucially as well, was previously at Index on Censorship. And he told me about the sort of the idea here from Reform and the distinction between the society and the university.
What's happened here is that Reform have reached out and asked to speak. The Debating Society, which is a private members' society, which can dictate its own rules and who it wishes to speak and not to speak at their events, has declined and quoted there, said that Reform and Sarah Pochin are contrary to their values. And Reform have gone out with the story saying that they've been banned. Now, they've been no more banned than, say, an LBC listener caller who does not get picked for the show that day, if I write an article and it doesn't get submitted to to a newspaper and it doesn't get used, that doesn't mean I'm banned. That means I don't have any right to speak there in the first place. Or indeed, if I was to say to Reform that I want to speak at their conference and they politely declined, I don't think I claim that I've been banned. I hadn't been invited in the first place. But of course, Reform have got the headline they want now. And they can make a fuss. They can make Trumpian noises about defunding the university, which has nothing to do with the decision. So it's a weird success for Reform, but it has nothing to do with free speech.
So dishonest and pathetic. So if we don't invite Sarah Poachin to our birthday parties, we'll be accused of banning her.
Yes,
or if she asked to come to our birthday party.
And we said no.
Certainly not.
I've got an invite
I've
list.
got black friends. I don't want you to be driven mad by their faces, you might say. Then we'd be banning her from our birthday party.
Well, quite. It wouldn't be banned.
Certainly not wanting her at our birthday party.
And that distinction there, as Poderick Reedy makes about the university, very keen to stress that they have not banned Reform, rather one of their independent societies run by students.
You pay to be a member of, presumably. I was at the University College Dublin Philosophical Debating Society last week. And, they are incredibly independent and entirely student-run. It's got absolutely nothing to do with central funding.
Yes.
Which they know. This is what we're reading between the lines. Poderick's well aware that they know this Reform. They're just trying to they are demonstrating contempt for the intelligence of their own supporters because they know that the headline and the provocation will work, even though the facts don't back up the claim at all. Pathetic, as I say, and dishonest. That's 3.
No, 4. That was 4. This is number
more.
5. One more now. We're going to be slightly careful because obviously there's a by-election coming up. So this is with regards to the Gorton and Denton by-election. This has been widely publicised.
Full list of candidates is available at lbc.co.uk.
Thank you. There was Matt Goodwin, who is the Reform candidate. There was a hustings last night.
Well, he was in one of yesterday's stories slagging off Nigel Farage for being potentially an absolutely rubbish Prime Minister. But that was yesterday's story, not today's.
In a historic post, he did say that Mr Farage does not have the answers to Britain's problems and that Reform doesn't have the answers. But he's the candidate, and he pulled out of a hustings. The organisers, sources close to the organisers, have told me that happened last minute and only minutes before he posted on social media. Now, there are 2 reasons. The official reason, Matt Goodwin says in his statement, I've never been one to shy away from free and fair debate. I have serious concerns about the impartiality of the hustings that have been organised for tonight. Previous statements by the organising group give the clear impression that a fair and level platform will not be provided for all candidates. On that basis, I will not be attending. Now, it's organised by a local group called Local Voices. It was at the Gorton Methodist Church, and each candidate had 2 minutes to answer each question. I've also spoken with sources close to organising the event, and a charge levied at Mr Goodwin, which he has not responded to as of yet, is that he asked for a green room before the hustings.
All to himself?
Yeah, well, to have a sort of private moment maybe before the debate starts. But they told him that at a Methodist church...
He's working on an erotic novel.
Well, that would give us more content. But he did tell us that the sort of claim is that because it was at a Methodist church, James, they're not a plenty green rooms at Methodist churches.
Presumably, and not much else.
Yeah, and so they I think the point was made that wouldn't be possible.
Right.
And then, obviously, the green room issue was not an issue in the end because Mr Goodwin did not attend the debate.
And actually, to knit together the Welsh University, Bangor University, and that by-election, a full list of candidates is available at lbc.co.uk. The University Union, the Politics Society, Debating and Political Society, points out that they have zero tolerance for any form of racism, transphobia or homophobia, displayed by the members of Reform UK, most obviously the woman who said that black and brown faces in television adverts drove her mad. And at this Methodist church in Gorton, presumably there would have been British people present who Matthew Goodwin has expressed a view often and publicly that they are not British at all.
Well, and as you say, this particular university society, making that point, they said that in a statement, very clear about the values. With regards to the church, I mean, that is obviously very separate in that they wanted Mr Goodwin to attend, but they didn't have a green room, and
bless him. Is he a snowflake?
Well, has
he ever tweeted about being a snowflake?
He has said.
Good. What did he say?
He said, "I'm not a snowflake."
Right. I think, as a general rule, anyone who goes on Twitter to say I'm not a snowflake, you can be fairly confident that they are in fact a snowflake.
And the Labour Party are now accusing him of being a snowflake.
Yes. It's 11:49 on Wednesday, and that's 13 stories already answering the question of what would it look like if anybody treated reform in the same way that the Daily Mail and most of the UK media treat parties that are behind them currently in the opinion polls. Do we call time on it now, or shall I commission a jingle?
Oh, I wouldn't want to take resource away from the newsagents. Up to you.
Well, very true.
You carry more weight.
There'll be hell to pay. There'll be hell to pay. Do we think there'll be more tomorrow, or do we feel that we've probably emptied the tank so far today? Or should we wait and see?
Well, these are all last 24 hours,
Yeah,
so I'll keep an eye.
Are you in tomorrow? Are you in the office?
I'm in.
Okay, so maybe there'll be more tomorrow from the Farage Files, featuring Henry Riley. Watch this space.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It's 11:53. You are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. PMQs on the way, and some people still waiting to contribute to our conversation about why we don't care enough, whatever we might think or claim about victims of child sexual abuse. So we move from the relatively ridiculous with Henry back to the deadly serious with Carl, who's in Tetbury. I just need to warn you, Carl, that PMQs is one of those things I can't move or crash. So we've got 4 or 5 minutes. What made you pick up the phone, mate?
Really, I'm 45 and I haven't talked about this out loud outside of my house this whole time. And I'm shaking. My stepdad was my perpetrator when I was about 4 or 5 years old, and although it wasn't the exact same abuse as others, it was physical abuse, and it was, I suppose, what we would call it torture in this day and age.
Right.
Humiliation, demasculation, and he left when I was 7 or 8, and I found myself broken as a child, I think, for the rest of my days. And it wasn't until I joined the Royal Navy and that kind of made me as a man, the man I wanted to be.
Yeah.
And it's now I've got 2 daughters who are 6 years old. I've got twins. They give me the determination and the fight to stamp out this behaviour. If I ever see this in my workplaces, I put my 2 big boots on and I jump all over it. In a delicate way when required, of course.
I understand. Did anybody believe you? Did you tell anyone when you were young?
Yeah, so it all happened when I was 4 or 5, and we moved house and it stopped. But I told my mum when I was 9 on the way to the shop. And she kind of didn't probe too much, I suppose, but then years went by. I thought she'd dealt with it, if you like.
Yeah.
But then she said she contacted social services and they called me a liar. So
social services did?
Yeah, I mean, it was. I doubt whether the call was ever made. Yeah.
Oh, I see what you mean. So she told you she'd phoned social services and they said you were lying.
They would at least want to speak to me.
That's weapons grade, keeping the pin in the grenade, isn't it? That.
Absolutely. So I left the house at 16 and I went away and never went back. Jumped into submarines, lived under the water for a while as well. So, and you know, it was like literally a duck to water. I built myself up.
I'm so glad to hear that. But you know, I mean, there is still that 4 or 5 year old boy somewhere inside you who needs looking after, isn't there?
There is, and I'm doing that now. Finally,
good. That makes me so happy.
And I think, you know, when it comes to this, happened in the next room, and it happened, and you know, I knew she wasn't asleep. Put it that way,
right?
Because he heard me to come in the room to do what he did to me.
Yeah.
You know, so I knew she wasn't oblivious to it. I just knew in the end that she didn't want to talk about it. So I raised it up when I was about 30 years old. Actually, around about my 30th birthday.
Yeah. And
I was like, "Can we have a chat about it? Can we talk about a few things?" And I got the shutter walls went up. I got the "why are you bringing it up now?" Then I got the flying monkeys of my brother and sister, or my half brother and sister, saying, "Why are you having a go at mum?" Blah blah blah. Okay. And we haven't spoke for 16 years.
First of all, well done, right? And I'm sorry. Second of all, do you have any understanding of what drove her to let you down so badly? Can you, I mean, sympathy probably is too strong a word, but comprehension is not. Go on.
I would say the biggest issue with victims bringing it up to either somebody who should have intervened or, you know, or an authority is you hold a mirror up. So you show them either the monster who did it, or you show them the conspirators or the other people who were complicit or didn't intervene, and you show them a very ugly picture as a mirror. And I think one thing kicks in, whether it's institution or whether it's individual, and it's self-preservation. Whether it's preservation of the institution or whether it's preservation of their own beliefs, because if they went back into their minds, they would have to then reason with why they didn't intervene and so on and so forth.
Because she knew. And the only way she can cling on to the lie that she didn't know is by denying that it happened in the face of all the evidence to the contrary, up to and including alienating her own boy.
Absolutely. And you know what? I think I will never do that to my children.
I know you won't.
No matter what they turn up with, regardless of whatever it is, I am there, always.
So they didn't break you. Nobody broke you. Or if they did, you fixed this. You put yourself back together.
They damn well didn't.
I'm proud to talk to you, Carl.
I'm a massive fan of yours as well, James, and I appreciate your... As a sailor, as a submariner, you are a beacon of at least hope and sensibility in this god-awful world at the minute. And I speak to my wife about a lot of this stuff, and she listens to you as well. And we respect you, and what is going on in the world right now, it's coming out, and we would rather know who the monsters are than not knowing who they are.
That's beautifully put, and thank you for the kind words as well, although they weren't necessary. It's as I say, it's a privilege to talk to you in such heartfelt context, and what powerful testimony you bring to the conversation. I mean, it's still a mystery, isn't it? And not a mystery at the same time as to why we make all the right noises in all the right spaces, but we don't ever really follow through or deliver on it. It's coming up to 12 noon. PMQs is almost upon us. Natasha Clark is in the room where it happened. Well, not quite the room where it happens, the room where this happens. All eyes on Parliament, where at the moment that Kemi Badenoch gets to her feet, we will cross live. I mean, obvious and not obvious. Possibly we know what the overall thrust will be, but not the detail, perhaps.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, if we start with what we do know, it's probably going to be a very difficult PMQs for the Prime Minister, isn't it? And it was a very difficult one last week. Some people were saying we may have seen the last PMQs of the Prime Minister last week.
Some people, Natasha.
Some people, yeah. I didn't say it at the time. But it felt very difficult. Kemi Badenoch landed what many thought at the time might be a very, very... And it was a very damaging blow that Kemi Badenoch landed to get the Prime Minister to admit that he did know about that ongoing relationship with Epstein when he appointed Lord Mandelson. And this is going to be, I think, a very difficult one for him. He needs to show, I'm back... my cabinet are here, my cabinet are supporting me, I've got the support of my MPs, and he has spent the last 48 hours rebuilding that, right? So from Monday night, the coup that never was, essentially, the MP support was rebuilt on the Monday night of the Parliamentary Party, the cabinet tweeting their support, and he spent the last 48 hours building back up again to this position. And I wonder if James, you agree with what Stephen Swidford of The Times wrote this morning on social media. Feels like for the first time in a while, PMQs genuinely matters again, and has done for some weeks now. It's beyond the usual carefully crafted, pre-planned statements for social media, and it's now a proper bear pit that has significant political consequences. I agree with some of that.
I think most political journalists will agree with that.
Yeah, but I
don't think punters will.
We were talking a few months ago how we thought Prime Minister's questions were boring, and now it feels like a real pivotal moment in the political week again.
I guess so, although I don't think that the palpable hits that Kemi Badenoch scored last week have really had anything to do with what's happened to Keir Starmer subsequently.
No, I think it was. I think it was him admitting that.
It was the money
stuff. The first time felt, and MPs that I spoke to were quite shocked that it'd come to that. And he tried not to answer the question a few times, and it fell to Kemi Badenoch to really push him on that. So I felt like that was a bit of a moment. We could see another one of those today.
What would it look like? What might be the entry point?
Well, it's a good question. There's a lot to pick from, right? You've got today the appointment of Matthew Doyle has appeared, and I think Kemi Badenoch might want to try to press him on that and link that to the Lord Mandelson scandal, because she's trying to paint this picture of Sir Keir Starmer as, having a bit of a pattern of overlooking these issues and not having this...
Matthew Doyle, a former Downing Street communications guy who stayed friends with somebody after they were found to be a paedophile.
Charged, I think,
Charged.
with an offence, and continued to campaign and to support alongside a man that later was convicted. And yes, she's trying to paint this picture.
He's lost the whip. He's had the whip removed.
He's had the whip removed, but like Lord Mandelson...
Why now?
Yeah, well, why now when this was known about in Westminster circles and was published in newspapers for the last couple of months? It does seem to be a bit of an oversight from the Prime Minister's team there, if indeed that's exactly what's happened. But of course, I think it's the chaos of the last few weeks and the Prime Minister's leadership. Is he the right man for the job? And that needs to be the thread that goes through all of Kemi Badenoch's questions today, and that's, I think, where she can most damage. I wonder whether she'll mention Wes Streeting. I haven't seen whether he's on the front... Oh, there he is. He's on the front bench. He's sitting next to the Prime Minister, and that will be an important moment, I think, for her to note too.
Let's find out.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And can I associate my side of the House with the Prime Minister's words on the horrific stabbing in North London yesterday, as well as the shooting in Canada? When he was leader of the opposition, the Prime Minister said, and I quote, "I never turn on my staff. When they make mistakes, I carry the can." What changed?
Prime Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I've accepted responsibility and apologised for the mistakes that I made. But let me say this, Mr. Speaker. Morgan McSweeney helped me change our party and helped me win a landslide election victory, which delivered for them the smallest Tory party in over 100 years. And what's her great achievement? To make it even smaller.
Kemi Badenoch.
The whips have done a great job today. This is like the 37th... Oh, he said, yeah, exactly. Done a great job today getting them cheering. We all know that they've been sick for the last week. Because let's remember, Mr. Speaker, just last week, he told us that he had full confidence in his Chief of Staff, Morgan McSweeney. On Sunday, he sacked Morgan McSweeney. Last week... he resigned, yes. Last week, Mr. Speaker, he was defending the Cabinet Secretary. Now he is sacking him. Yes. What changed?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, in January, she said she had full confidence, 100% confidence, she said, be no more defections from her party. 48 hours later, the Shadow Foreign Minister defected. 8 days after that, the former Home Secretary defected. The only question now is, who's next? She needs to wake up. Her party is dying.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister is demonstrating stratospheric levels of delusion if he thinks the problem is on this side of the House. And he didn't say anything about why the Cabinet Secretary is going. We know the truth. It is because he is throwing everyone under a bus except himself. And Mr. Speaker, the Mandelson episode was not an isolated incident. A few weeks ago, he announced a peerage for one Matthew Doyle, his former Director of Communications. Immediately after that, the Sunday Times published on the front page that Doyle campaigned for a man charged with child sex offences. Yet, despite the Prime Minister knowing this, he gave Doyle a job for life in the House of Lords anyway. Why?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, Matthew Doyle did not give a full account of his actions. And on Monday, I promised my party and my country there would be change. And yesterday, I removed the whip from Matthew Doyle. I'll tell you what other action we've taken, Mr. Speaker. Along with the Safeguarding Minister, I and this government have introduced the most far-reaching violence against women and girls strategy. And I'll tell you what else we've done. This government has introduced a pay rise for millions of working-class women. What did the Leader of the Opposition do? She opposed it. This government's introducing greater protection for women at work. What did the Leader of the Opposition do? She opposed it. And I'll tell you what else she opposes. This government removing the disgusting rape clause that they put in place.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister pretends not to know about Matthew Doyle. It was on the front page of the Sunday Times. He cannot explain why he gave this man a peerage, and I think they should be wondering why they're still cheering for him after that. And the Prime Minister, sometimes likes to claim, as he just did, that he cares about violence against women. The truth is, he only cares about the victims when he's trying to save his own skin. They can shake their heads. We saw it with grooming gangs. We saw it with Mandelson. And now we see it with Doyle. Isn't that what a former prosecutor would call an established pattern of behaviour?
Mr. Speaker, I'm going to take no lectures from the Tories in standards in public life. She defended Partygate for months and months and months. And even now she says it was overblown. The Shadow Foreign Secretary broke the ministerial code by bullying. Boris Johnson kept her. The leader of the opposition promoted her. She sits on her front bench. Her former Shadow Justice Secretary complained about not seeing enough white faces in Birmingham, and she was too weak to sack him for racism.
Nobody buys it, Mr. Speaker. Not even the Labour women, because they know he always puts the Downing Street Boys Club first. And how dare he criticise us? We weren't the ones stuffing government with hypocrites and paedophile apologists. He can't build a team, Mr. Speaker. He has no plan. He can't even run his own office, let alone the country. He is now dealing with a new scandal of appointing someone who campaigned for a man convicted of having indecent pictures of girls as young as 10. Isn't the Prime Minister ashamed that that will be his legacy?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, my legacy is changing my party and winning a general election. And I'll tell you this, I kicked my former leader out of my party. Her former leader, Liz Truss, broke the economy and has descended into bonkers conspiracy theories. I kicked her out of Parliament. She's too weak to kick her out of their party.
Mr. Speaker, he hasn't apologised for appointing Matthew Doyle because he won't take responsibility. He never does, and they know it. The Prime Minister is now telling everyone that he's never lost a fight. It's because he won't step into the ring. He's never lost a fight. He's walked away from welfare reform. He won't stand up to the unions. He won't stand up to China. He can't even stand up to Mauritius. Mr. Speaker, he's had 3 cabinet secretaries, 4 chiefs of staff, 5 director of communications in just 18 months. And now he is mired in yet another scandal. Does he ever look in the mirror and ask himself, is the real problem staring him in the face?
Mr. Speaker, I delivered a landslide victory for our government. Only 4 people have ever led the Labour Party to victory in a general election. I'm one of them. And she talks about numbers. Let us remember, Mr. Speaker, 5 Prime Ministers, 7 Chancellors, 8 Home Secretaries, 8 Foreign Secretaries, 16 Housing Secretaries, all completely useless, all failed Britain, and this Prime Minister's clearing up the mess. She comes here every week desperately fighting to save her dying party. I'm fighting to change our country. Interest rates down, inflation down, waiting lists down, child poverty down, and I'll tell you another thing's down, the number of Tory MPs.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The government has delivered the funding needed to rebuild the new Frimley Park Hospital after the party opposite made empty, unfunded promises to my constituents. Now we urgently need to get on with announcing the preferred site, along with the investment needed to improve public transport, road access and parking. Will the Prime Minister urge NHS England to make this a priority and help give much-needed clarity to Bracknell Forest residents?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, delivering the new Frimley Park Hospital is a priority. Under the party opposite, his constituents were given totally empty promises. They failed patients and they failed staff. We put a proper plan and the funding to match, and the Trust are making real progress on the business case, and I want to see spades in the ground as quickly as possible.
Said David, leader of the Liberal Democrats.
Mr. Speaker, can I associate myself with the Prime Minister's remarks about the dreadful stabbing of 2 children in Brent and about the horrifying shootings in British Columbia? Our thoughts and prayers are with the children's parents and the people of Canada, especially those grieving the loss of loved ones. Mr. Speaker, to appoint one paedophile supporter cannot be excused as misfortune. To appoint 2 shows a catastrophic lack of judgment. The Right Honourable Gentleman once told this House that when a Prime Minister refuses to take responsibility, and I quote, "It only serves to convince people that things cannot get better, that governments cannot improve people's lives, and that progress is not possible because politics does not work." Does he still agree with himself? And does he share my fear that that is exactly what is happening now?
Minister.
People in this country, millions of people, have been let down for years and years and years. And one of the reasons was austerity, which his party supported. He should take accountability and take responsibility for what he has inflicted on this country.
Surrender, David.
Mr. Speaker, I think I touched a raw nerve. But I think the whole House will agree that the Manson scandal has shown yet again why we need a duty of candour for anyone and everyone in public office. Mr. Speaker, there should be no more delays in putting the Hillsborough law on the statute books. After the long fight by the bereaved families and so many others, like the Mayor of Greater Manchester. The Prime Minister once said it would be one of the first things he did in number 10. Will he finally do it now, even if it's the last thing he does?
Prime Minister.
The panel report in the Hillsborough case was when I started working on the Hillsborough case. That was in 2012, when his party were in power. And they could have passed this law a long time ago and saved a lot of grief. I'm proud that this Labour government is bringing in a Hillsborough law, something I've committed to for a very, very long time.
Richard Quidley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As the Prime Minister will have heard me say, the Isle of Wight is a fantastic place
That's
to live.
almost
work,
bang on the money, seconds and minutes wise. It's 12:15. We'll pick over the bones of what you just heard after this.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It's 17 minutes after 12. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. I read a random selection of texts. Aidan says, I'd say that was 50-50 the most animated I've heard Starmer. I like that because it's not necessarily a compliment or an insult. Keir Starmer is so 6-0s, much better when he goes on the attack, says Ben. Kemi Badenoch doesn't seem to be up to the job. She's failing to shake Starmer. I'm no Tory, but I'd like to see a more effective opposition, says Kenny. Open goal for Badenoch today if it weren't for her own party's record that she was part of. She has Mark Francois sitting beside her today. I noticed that as well. If that's what she is offering the country, then the Tories really are finished. Andy writes, afternoons, James. Starmer is on fire. Let me find something for balance. She has a lot of ammunition, but this is very poor from Badenoch. Kemi, all stones and glass houses. Starmer, this is from Chris. Starmer might be done if this weak performance is the best he has when his back is against the wall. And Mike, I think, treading a middle ground, saying that looks likely to be the hardest PMQ Starmer will ever face, and Badenoch was incredibly forgettable. That's possibly a little unfair. I'm going to test you now on something, Natasha Clark.
I love a test. I don't love a test.
Where do these come from? Breathe, breathe, breathe. Pause, pause, pause. You are a serious person who does big things. Pivot to attacking Labour when uncomfortable. Remember, you are the standard bearer of the right. And finally, don't let people think you are easily wound up.
Gosh, you got my notes. How did you get my diary? No, I think you're referring to Kemi Badenoch's diary, are you not?
Yes, after she accused Keir Starmer of looking in the mirror or not looking in the mirror, I was reminded of what she apparently likes to intone to herself when she is looking in the mirror after she accidentally left her notebook behind in a hotel room. All of those things. My favourite is probably, You are a serious person who does big things. I'm going to start doing that
I tell
before the show.
myself that every day. Yeah,
before you come into the
I'm
studio.
A serious person.
I am you, because you must be looking in the mirror, mustn't you? Because you're saying you are anyway, sorry, what did you make of all that?
I mean, it would, like we said, it was going to be a difficult one for Keir Starmer. I don't think he particularly did fantastically. It was a bit of an open goal. I agree with that texter there. Keir obviously had a little bit of fire in his belly. I think he was really rumbled by the Ed Davey question.
Yes.
He obviously knew that Kemi Badenoch was going to mention all of what she did. And
it looks opportunistic when she does it. But whether it's glass houses and stones, or whether it is the failure to implement Alexis J and all of these, people paying proper attention find it disingenuous. It somehow seemed authentic when Ed Davey did it.
It did. It seemed much more authentic, much more serious when Ed Davey did it, and I don't think he was expecting it. And he clearly, as Ed Davey said, touched a bit of a nerve, because you saw the sort of feisty Keir Starmer come out. We're calling him Keir Unplugged.
Is that
Westminster Circles? I know. Well, we're not. Ed Miliband is.
Right.
So, but it feels like, that is what this was one for the backbenchers, I think, today, and you saw both sides of the House of Commons really rallying around their leaders. And actually, I think both of them did put in the performance that their MPs wanted to see. However, Keir Starmer didn't really want to get into any of the details about Mandelson, about Matthew Doyle, and it felt he was very evasive of some of those questions. He just didn't, you saw by the fact that it was PMQs was a lot shorter, a minute or so shorter than it usually is, that he felt like he was trying to cut his answers short a bit there. His back felt like it was up against the wall with every question that Kemi Badenoch threw at him, but I don't think she landed the killer blow that she did last week.
I think you're probably right. I'm surprised by obviously this isn't a scientific survey, but last week people were very warm towards Kemi Badenoch, even in some cases reluctantly. It's not even close to that this week. There's a lot more praise for Keir Starmer than either you or I have expressed. I guess perhaps people quite like hearing him sound angry.
I think so.
Because it is real, isn't it?
You're hearing a lot of people say they want him to stand down, but you're also hearing a lot of people that say they don't. And I think those voices, the people that are saying they don't want him to stand down, especially, normal people. And I thought your phoning that you did yesterday with what, what do you think Keir Starmer should do now to turn it around, was a fascinating one, and what people thought that they wanted to see. I don't think Keir Starmer knows quite how he's going to turn it around. He's obviously, the number 10 Downing Street sort of fight back operation in the last few days has arguably been incredibly successful, because that's where we are now compared to where we were 3 days ago.
Yes.
I thought that he might quit. I thought that he might stand down a couple of days ago. He now appears that he is really going to fight this to the end. But what does that sort of next steps look like for Keir Starmer? What's he actually going to change? And that's not clear right now. Is he over the worst of this? Potentially, but he's obviously still got a huge mountain to climb. He's got so many other bear traps that he could potentially fall into.
And Matthew Doyle is for all of the people who were... it's perhaps somewhat naively, but genuinely claiming that this was all a media confection and that Starmer hadn't done any. And you can understand why some people who don't do what we do for a living might look at how the Tories were treated, Johnson in particular, scandal after scandal after scandal, and hanging on to his job and defending wrongdoing and all of those things. And yes, much of the media is biased, but the Mandelson thing was huge. And to muster some defence of him, and then for Doyle to come along yesterday, I'm very bad at this. I don't have good news sense. I'm surprised the Doyle story isn't bigger. Is it because no one knows his name, whereas Mandelson has such a mythology, has such high status in Labour Party mythology?
It was at the time. I remember, sort of in Westminster bubble circles, it was a big deal at the time.
Yeah, but it's not broken out.
But it's not, and I think it's because people don't know who he is. But I wonder, Keir Starmer's defence today of Matthew Doyle was Matthew Doyle did not give a full account of his actions. That's exactly what he said about Lord Mandelson.
It could be true, though, on both occasions. Absolutely
could be true. But, while Keir Starmer is unable to prove that, he can't, because the Metropolitan Police is saying, please don't release any documents. Can he reveal more about Matthew Doyle to try and prove his case? But equally, and we didn't hear it because we came to the break, but other MPs, including Stephen Flynn, saying that trying to thread this through Westminster and through what Keir Starmer's been doing, and saying, is he the most gullible DPP we've ever had?
I miss Stephen Flynn's contribution.
I know, me too.
Since the SNP lost its status as the third party in Parliament. Speaking of which, why do we think Ed Davey came out with his clause? exposed.
Oh, really, really good. Yeah, you know, I don't know why he sort of went in, but I guess we're heading into May elections and he's got to start distancing himself a bit. He said, clearly touched a nerve. But then he went to throw him a bone about Hillsborough law, because that's an easy one for the Prime Minister to go, I'm bringing this law. You guys never did. It's on the way. What more can he say about that? That was a really easy one for the Prime Minister.
Wasn't it?
Bat away.
They're both curious, actually. But perhaps they cancel each other out in terms of curiosity. Daisy Cooper's given a big speech in the last day. When was it? Was it yesterday?
This morning, no?
This morning, was it? Well, I'm asking you. You're the political editor.
This morning.
Yes.
She wants to break up the Treasury into 2 departments, and she's calling on Conservatives to join the Lib Dems.
Moderate Tories to join the Lib Dems. That was a contender for my phone-in this hour. Or in the last hour. I'm a bit obsessed with Tamara in Telford, Natasha, who rang me a while ago when I was pontificating about whether or not this constituency exists of moderate Tories. Were they all secret extremists all along who are, just tossing coins between Reform and Badenoch at the moment? Or is there this caucus that we usually now mention, people like Rory Stewart and David Gauke and Dominic Grieve and Anna Soubry, Michael Heseltine, Ken Clarke, people who were, objectively quite decent and not obviously bigoted or racist. Where do they go? And Daisy Cooper, because Badenoch hasn't made a home for them. In fact, she's insisted she's not going to. Yeah. And they can't possibly go to Reform. Labour probably be still a little bit rich for their blood. Are there a lot of them? And is the Liberal Democrats now their most natural home?
I think yes. On your first point, there was we discussed this a couple of weeks ago, didn't we? When Kemi Badenoch, we had that. I can't remember what was the name of that Tory group that's emerged recently, pressuring Kemi Badenoch to go more to the left.
Yeah, the name David Gauke. I can't remember either. Which was it all really?
Yeah, exactly. It's sort of gone on with a little bit of a whimper. But there was an attempt to try to bring Kemi Badenoch back.
They could have called it "We're Not All Mad" group. They didn't, but that's what they were trying to do, and it's withering, because she made it clear immediately that no, we don't want anybody moderate in our party, which is an extraordinary position to adopt.
Rather than saying, actually, we're all coming together, the Tory party were a broad church, and I think that's what they've always been, and that's why they've always been a very good election winning machine, because they do have a very broad church of opinion, including the left of the Conservative Party, and that group, which you would include David Gauke and Rory Stewart and all those people, they're sort of soft left of the Conservatives. That's why they've always been so good at winning elections. They have them out front, so as the Kemi Badenochs, the Robert Jenricks, and they have the David Gaukes and the Rory Stewarts.
Because of course there was room in her party for Robert Jenrick and his blatant racism when he started complaining about literally the colour of people's faces in Birmingham, and as Starmer has pointed out a couple of times now, he didn't get sacked for that. And yet to say there's no room in the party for people who could be loosely assembled under the umbrella that says we don't like racism actually, and we think Rishi Sunak is English. She was telling them to sling their hook, and Daisy Cooper is there with her collection tin, rattling her tin, hoping to...
Yeah, she should have made that speech a couple of weeks ago after Kemi Badenoch said, no, you can get out, and she should have said, well, you're welcome here, guys.
Final question, and I want to go to the news a bit early because we've got a lot of guests in the next bit of the programme. Is Ed Davies' job completely safe?
I don't think so,
So they're all fragile, really.
I think when you look at the left, and you look at the Green Party leader, Zach Polansky, doing incredibly well, you look at the Labour Party not doing so well, many people who would expect the Liberal Democrats to be capitalising, and according to the polls, they're not. Obviously, Ed Davies had a fantastic last election, right? Taking the party, and rebuilding it from the Nick Clegg decimation that we saw, and building it back. But... I don't think so. I think many people in his party are frustrated with the direction of travel, and I don't know if he'll make it to the next election either.
Oh, well, keeps us in business. That's it for another week. Natasha Clarke, LBC's political editor, thank you very much indeed. A little earlier than usual, at just after 12:28, we head to the headlines with Amelia Cox.
James O'Brien on LBC.
12:32 is the time. I mentioned to you earlier that I suspect we are going to encounter more cases like this in the coming days, weeks, months, but let's begin with the one that we know about, or even perhaps the six that we know about, that the one that has prompted our interest in it. Seamus Culleton has been detained by ICE, the Immigration and Customs Enforcement Operation in the United States of America, since September. And it's not entirely clear why. Attorney Ogor Winnie Okoye is his lawyer, and prior to a press conference later today that will be attended by Seamus's wife Tiffany, Ogor Winnie has very kindly managed to squeeze us into their schedule. So what reason, what does Seamus understand, or indeed what does his attorney understand the reason for his incarceration to be?
Okay, that's a great question. Good morning, James. It's early here and snowy on the ground. I'm trying to keep safe while I'm driving and answering the questions.
Thank you.
Okay, so Seamus entered the United States as a visa waiver entrant in September of 2009. The implication of entering as a visa waiver entrant is that you also implicitly give up your right to contest removability if you overstay by 90 days, which is the time you're mandated to stay for. Seamus did overstay for 90 days. And that was back in 2009. Seamus, since established his life in the United States, owns a small construction plastering business, subsequently marries Tiffany, submits the paperwork required to adjust status, which is essentially get a green card, and had his employment authorization approved. Let me be clear. There is a statutory exception for people like Seamus who are married to U.S. citizens because of being an immediate relative to a U.S. citizen. It's etched in our immigration statutes. It is also a lot of policy memos giving preference, policy memos from the United States Citizenship and Immigration Services, which is the agency primarily versed with adjudicating immigration petitions. So historically, and in the 22 years that I've done this work, it's not a problem if the person eventually marries a U.S. citizen. They get the special status of an immediate relative, and typically they will have their petition adjudicated. So Seamus did inform the officers at the time of his arrest, wait, I have an interview for my green card. It didn't mean anything. He still was, arrested and detained, and that's why we're here today.
When and where was he arrested?
So he was arrested in Massachusetts at the Home Depot. He's a construction guy. I guess he said he went to take back some items he didn't need that he purchased, and he happened to be at the wrong place at the wrong time, and that was how he became a casualty of
What were they checking? How did they establish that he was, who he is, as it were?
So they said they ran a license plate. You would know if you run someone's license plate whether or not the person has necessary papers. They said they ran a license plate, but also they typically are usually situated in places like that. The Supreme Court said it was okay for them to go to such places, knowing that non-U.S. citizens work,
a lot in the construction industry, of course. Yes, I hear you. What do we know about the circumstances of his custody? What sort of facility is he in, and how's he getting on at this detention centre because I think he was moved to Texas. He lives in Boston, but he was moved to Texas last September.
Yes. He was originally moved from Burlington, Massachusetts, Boston to Batavia, New York, and then ultimately to El Paso, Texas. He is currently located at the El Paso Camp East, Montana, El Paso, Texas. It's like a makeshift, it's like a makeshift facility, but he's been there for 4.5 months.
How's he going on?
I saw him 2 weeks ago.
What sort of condition is he in? What sort of conditions is he experiencing in the facility, and what sort of shape is he in?
So I can only speak to what I know. I think he gave an extensive interview to some Irish newspaper or program describing the horrendous condition. I can only speak to what I saw. He looked like he lost at least 40 pounds, and he also looked like he was yellow. Like someone who was jaundiced, and he was not doing well when I, saw him complaining about toothache and so all sorts of things. But that's what I saw. I can't speak to what he's experiencing.
I understand. What's your job now? What is?
Well, we have done a habeas complaint, essentially challenging the unlawfulness of his detention and the lack of notice. A judge just came back about 2 weeks ago, essentially reiterating that the no clause, no contest clause of the visa waiver program sort of like ties her hands. And there was a question of whether or not he was given proper notice. The government got papers showing signatures that he vehemently denies were his. The judge pointed out all of the, egregious mistakes by the government, but still did side with the government. So at this time, we are recalibrating and thinking of should we do petition for review, the next step, or I think at this stage, it's a matter of also putting pressure. His detention is inexplicable, essentially given the statutory exception and statutory preference given to people in his category. It's just never happened that I know of in all the times that I've done this work, that someone who is married to a U.S. citizen, has no criminal record, has been well established, just poses no danger to public safety or a flight risk. Just someone who's an asset to his community, just an all-around model immigrant that submits a paperwork based on a marriage to a U.S. citizen is just still wanting to be deported. But I don't know. It's inexplicable. So it's the pressure where a lot of people on this in our office and a lot of volunteers just contacting senators and representatives to see, because all it is a favorable discretion. If the Department of Homeland Security or ICE says, okay, I will just exercise the favorable discretion that they should have done, in September, he would get out today and he will get the same paper. He will get into his interview and get the same paper that they say he lacks. So that's where we're at today.
Wow. Thank you very much indeed. I know you're very busy today, and this the press conference with Seamus' wife Tiffany is scheduled for later today. Attorney Ogor, Winnie, Okoye, thank you very much indeed. Seamus Culleton's lawyer. That interview with Seamus, if you want to hear it, was on the RTE in Ireland with the Transport Minister, actually, Dara O'Brien, no relation, saying that the highest level of government is now addressing this case. I just have a suspicion that there is a lot more of this going on involving Irish and British people than is currently being picked up on or reported, or that the Financial Times had a sniff of the story yesterday, although that involved criminal records or misdemeanors. I just watch this space, okay, and let me know if you're aware of any people in similar situations, whether it's happened in the States or at the embassy here, or even potentially at airports on either side of the Atlantic. Simon Marks is on the other side of the Atlantic. LBC's Washington correspondent joins us live. I mean, it's one of those days where I don't know where to start, Simon, so I'll let you decide. I'll delegate in the spirit of Keir Starmer.
Well, James, just on the issue of Seamus Culleton, to put it into its broader perspective, one of the reasons why the discretion no longer applies in these cases, or is no longer being applied in these cases, is because that for ICE and the Border Patrol, this is now a numbers game in the United States. They are being told by President Trump himself, by Stephen Miller, the Deputy White House Chief of Staff, to accelerate the number of people that are being rounded up and thrown out of the country. And to put the numbers into perspective, Seamus Culleton is one of more than 69,000 people who are currently in detention across the United States awaiting deportation. And actually, that attorney is lucky that she was able to find him, because all over the country there are lawyers now struggling even to locate their clients in these ICE and Border Patrol facilities nationwide. And plans are being laid, even right here in the Washington, D.C. area, to build more detention centres and camps that the government intends to fill as those mass deportations accelerate. I mean, we've all taken our eyes off Minneapolis. It's now, it was only last month that 2 American citizens lost their lives, I think it is fair to say completely unnecessarily, at the hands of ICE and the Border Patrol in Minneapolis. And there have been these promises to remove 700 immigration agents from the streets. But on the ground in Minneapolis, there is still tremendous fear, particularly among migrant communities and people who are opening the doors of their homes and giving literal house room to people who are afraid to go out on the streets, worried that the remaining more than 2,000 ICE and Border Patrol agents are going to sweep them off those streets. So, we've got to keep very mindful of the unprecedented scale of all of this and the brutality of the treatment. It is fair to say that Barack Obama deported more people than Donald Trump is currently deporting. Obama was always called here the deporter-in-chief. But it's the brutality of all of this that is so different.
Sweet summer child that I am, I was going to ask why they're doing it when the promise was, of course, just to focus upon criminals and gang members and people who eat cats and dogs and various other nonsenses and lies. But, of course, that's why the numbers matter, because they'll claim at some point that all the people they have deported are in those categories, even though they're categorically and demonstrably not, because the truth left the building some time ago. Epstein. We got a Prime Minister, you probably heard, in all sorts of trouble, despite not being in the files. Donald Trump's regime is full of people who are, including, of course, him. Now, this is a meaningless statistic, but I think people will enjoy it. He appears in it more times than the words Harry Potter appear in all 7 Harry Potter books. But Lutnick is the one probably with the most uncomfortable questions to answer.
Yeah, well, I think it is worth making the point that Donald Trump claims that he's been absolved by the release of those 3 million pages of documents a few days ago. I mean, absolution is still quite a way off for President Trump. There are all sorts of questions swirling, particularly now that we know that in July of 2006, he told the police chief in Palm Beach in Florida that he was delighted that moves were being made against Jeffrey Epstein. Thank goodness you're stopping him. And Trump told the police chief that everybody knew about Epstein's evil antics, and indeed specifically suggested to the police chief, this is according to an interview that the FBI conducted with that former police chief in 2019, told him to keep an eye, to investigate Ghislaine Maxwell. She's the evil one, he said. This is the same President Trump who says that he was completely unaware of anything untoward taking place in Epstein's world, just didn't like him, thought he was, not the right kind of person that he wanted at Mar-a-Lago, and so threw him out of the club. So the White House has got some explaining to do on that. Yesterday it was Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick.
Yeah.
Well, or not, yes, exactly. Precisely. They won't be doing any explaining. No, precisely. Exactly. Yesterday, of course, it was Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick who found himself doing some explaining under oath in the Senate. He was testifying before the Appropriations Subcommittee because Howard Lutnick's another one who has said he cut Epstein off as early as 2005, wanted nothing to do with him. But then the documents revealed that actually Lutnick and his entire family and family friends of theirs had lunch with Epstein on Epstein's island in the Caribbean in 2012. And then there was a subsequent meeting with Epstein at his New York home. So there are calls growing for Lutnick either to be fired or to resign. And remember, he's a big deal. He's the big, cocky, garrulous architect of Donald Trump's tariffs policy. He's been one of the architects of Trump's global trade war. At the moment, the White House is circling the wagons and insisting he's staying within the administration. But he's certainly been caught out by the documents release of earlier this month, with every possibility that if more documents come out, there will be more revelations about him and indeed Donald Trump. We have to say both men, of course, deny any wrongdoing.
Yes, although I think Lutnick would be toast under any previous regime for the simple contradiction of his own public claims with regards to contact. And 2012, 4 years after Epstein was convicted of soliciting a minor for prostitution. Do you know, somewhat unexpectedly, Charles I popped up in our contemplations earlier today when we were talking about the Epstein impact on the monarchy, on the current King Charles III. So Charles I, if my history is correct, the Civil War, of the many seeds that started the Civil War, it was Charles I trying to use the full force of the law to punish parliamentarians who had said mean things about him or things that he didn't like. Donald Trump is up to similar antics, I think, and has failed so far.
Yes, well, he's trying to via his entirely sycophantic and pliant US attorney here in Washington, D.C., a woman by the name of Jean Pirro, a former judge in Westchester County, New York, but in national terms, much better known as a former vituperative pro-Trump host on Fox News. She was appointed to the US Attorney's Office here in Washington, D.C., and she basically is one of Trump's hatchet people. He says, I think we ought to be pursuing this criminal investigation. She doesn't push back at all. She jumps up, salutes, and says, yes, absolutely. She is the woman who brought the prosecution, the indictment against the Fed chair, Jerome Powell. The White House said it knew nothing of this before suddenly discovering that Jerome Powell was being looked at for possible criminal prosecution over completely trumped-up charges relating to the cost of refurbishment work at the Federal Reserve headquarters. Now, Judge Pirro has been unable to secure an indictment before a grand jury here in Washington so that she could prosecute 6 Democrat lawmakers who made a video doing nothing more than telling members of the armed forces here that they should not obey orders that are unlawful. And of course, this was around the time that the National Guard was first being mobilized here in Washington, D.C. There were threats by Trump to invoke the Insurrection Act of 1807. Those threats still outstanding. Every possibility that he will do it later this year and flood the streets of particularly Democrat-run cities with active duty troops and military personnel. So these 6 Democrat lawmakers put a video together saying to members of the serving military, you know, don't obey orders that are unlawful because you'll be on the hook if you do it. And that was considered seditious treason by Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of War, and the President. And the US Attorney Pirro tried to indict those 6 lawmakers, and the grand jury here was not buying it. This was the same US Attorney's Office that also couldn't get an indictment against a former Department of Justice employee who was fired, and I am not making this up, for throwing a sandwich at federal law enforcement agents on the streets of Washington, D.C. She couldn't get an indictment to prosecute a bloke who had chucked a sandwich at some law enforcement officers, but they are still at it in that US Attorney's Office here in Washington.
They're definitely not snowflakes. Finally and briefly, if you would, because I've got something important up next, something else important up next. I didn't even know we had a special envoy to the UK. I didn't even know Trump had a special envoy to the UK, but he's meeting with the president later today.
Yes, you wouldn't know it because he hasn't done a thing, but this is Mark Burnett, who was the creator of The Apprentice and therefore a good mate of Donald Trump's. Also a man who's sitting on a vast video archive of Donald Trump's that has not been released to the public for curious reasons. Mark Burnett was appointed special envoy, not the same as ambassador. No one really understood what all that meant. He was supposed to build a bridge between Washington and Westminster. If you look at the US Embassy's website in the UK, there is no reference to any activity by Mark Burnett over the last year. He's now told Politico that he has left the diplomatic service. Tonight, he's meeting the president at the White House for a closed-door meeting. It's on the president's schedule. Maybe this is the departure. Yeah. This is the thank you for not doing very much, but we're going to keep an eye on it.
So the mystery, of course, how will we tell whether he's still in the job or not, given how he did when he had it? Simon Marks, thank you very much. Up next, I need you to just go to the music room, please, and get the world's tiniest violin, because the former editor of the Daily Mail, Paul Dacre, is in court explaining how upset he is by some of the allegations that he's facing. More on that after this.
James O'Brien on LBC.
James, we don't have loads of time. Let's get straight to it. Oh, OK. 12:55 is the time. Emma Jones is a board director at Hacked Off. She's been in the High Court this morning where Paul Dacre, who has made a career, many would argue, out of ruining lives, has been complaining about some of the allegations that his organisation, the Daily Mail group, is facing. Emma has been observing proceedings. Emma, what can you tell us?
Well, we were expecting, the man behind the curtain to be this commanding presence, and yet what we got from Paul Dacre really was a bit of a shambolic performance because, He claims to have absolutely no knowledge. He's been shown invoice after invoice showing his paper to be the top user of PIs, private investigators, and yet he claims it's something that he just didn't know about. £3 million worth of invoices were found during the course of this investigation in a box, which seemed to have been sort of whittled away somewhere. Anyway, they were unearthed, and Mr. Dacre claims he didn't know what they were for.
Was he ambushed? Was he ambushed by that, Emma? Would he not have known that the prosecution was going to produce this box like a rabbit from a hat when he arrived in the witness box earlier yesterday?
He did know about this, but he claimed, whenever pressed on the detail, that it wasn't something that was within his reach.
As editor.
As editor-in-chief of the two papers, he claimed no knowledge of what went on and kept asking for specifics. When he was given the specifics by David Sherborne, he then claimed no knowledge of the stories, and his memory became flaky. He veered from a very sort of flaky kind of nervous performance to a man full of hyperbole when he needed to be. He wanted to put out statements of it sort of being unjust, statements that he thought would make the headlines. But then when pressed on the details, his voice changed. He became quiet and muttered, really.
And more today, more to go. What time does it wrap up? Because only 2 days of cross-examination, I think, for
yeah, which we thought there would be more, but he's been let off quite lightly. We don't know why. And his legal chief, Liz Hartley, will be on next, followed by all the reporters, which will be interesting because he's laid a lot of the blame really on the reporters and said that apparently all the reporters were carrying around a code of conduct in their pockets as part of their role. Well, I worked at that paper and I've never seen anyone with a code of conduct in their back pocket, I'll tell you that much.
Well, I was only the video games reviewer, so I don't think I'd have been given one anyway, but I take your point, Emma Jones. Many thanks. I shall let me detain you no longer. Back in court later this afternoon when the man responsible for the enemies of the people, describing judges, of course, the crush the saboteurs, describing democratically elected MPs, attacks upon academic freedom. One columnist, Dick Littlejohn, cited by a coroner at the inquest into the suicide of a woman as a contributor of significance to the general conversation, all of these things. But he's very upset by the allegations being brought by Prince Harry, Stephen Lawrence's mum Doreen, Sir Elton John, Elizabeth Hurley and others. It's coming up to 12:59. You are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. If you missed any, I might even stroll down to the High Court myself later and report back tomorrow. If you missed any of today's show, you can listen back on our free Global Player app or the LBC app, where you can also stay up to date with all the latest news, videos and opinion. You can listen to a range of podcasts, including James O'Brien Daily, the best bits from this show every day. And Full Disclosure, which is rather splendid this week. Download the official LBC app featuring Mark Constantine, who founded Lush, and like Sheila Fogarty, has synesthesia. It's all free from your app store now. Coming up at 4 on LBC.
In case people weren't listening, I do.
It's Tom saw it, but now it's time for Sheila Fogarty.
You've been to Ireland, haven't you?
It's funny you should say that. Are you looking at my knitwear?
I'm looking at your gorgeous Aran sweater.
I actually had this delivered from Ireland and paid duty because of Brexit.
Well done, yeah.
And then arrived in Ireland and it turned out...
And saw it in the shops.
Yes, but I did. So the duty cancelled out the online discount. They're nice jumpers.
They're lovely. You look like, you know when you buy a picture frame and there's a guy in the picture frame?
That's what I was going for.
And he looks like he might be, a Canadian...
That's exactly what I was going for. Yes, that's me, rugged.
Look a bit rugged and handsome. Those are the words I was struggling to find, yeah.
James O'Brien on LBC.